The stunned warrior rushed forward in the middle of the battle, constantly calling out for a certain girl named Sania. However, the man still can't find her, which makes him panic. He sincerely wishes that she would return to him, at least now. But suddenly, the warrior notices a girl's silhouette shining with golden light nearby and realizes that he has finally found Sania. The young man is incredibly happy that he was able to find her after all this. But the girl knight suddenly looked coldly at the guy named Tessar and calmly called out to him. The bright sun illuminated the ground, around which was strewn with the bodies of fallen warriors. Then Senia, hinting at what was happening around her, asked the man if he was happy now, since it was because of his selfish goal. Tessar looked at the lady with fear, who added that there was now no room for love in her heart, and said that he simply wanted to make her happy. The night girl objected that it was a lie and he did not want to make her happy, and she no longer wanted to return to this world, which the man was very taken aback by. The warrior desperately asked his girlfriend not to leave him alone, because this was not what he wanted at all. But suddenly, a sharp dagger shattered Tessar's reality into 1,000 pieces when Senya said that she hated him with all her heart. How does a man come to his senses, lying on the floor, thinking that everything was completely different, and he wanted her to survive at any cost and choose life? The young man looked at himself in the mirror, and his bright yellow eyes widened in surprise. He realized that he had returned to the past again. He raised himself up on his elbows and saw the same dagger that he had seen shortly before. Tessar was determined that this time he would protect his precious Senya. Meanwhile, the same girl, armed with a rake, from early morning, asked the stranger who had suddenly arrived who he was and whether they knew each other. Tessar stood on his knees before her, shedding bitter tears, and called out to her miserably. The man looked up at her, thinking that he had finally found her this time. He hung his head in exhaustion and told the girl that he had come to bring her back. On the outskirts, morning starts very early for the villagers. At dawn, the main character goes to the chicken coop to collect eggs to make breakfast. After breakfast, she goes to school, then returns home to finish her housework. It is difficult for Senia to find time to relax, as she comes from a family of farmers where there is a lot of housework. However, 20-year-old Senia Sunset Hill is still not going to give up on her goal, namely to get to the city away from this damn village. The girl is very bored and does not understand how much longer she needs to stay in this backwater, and there is also talk about marriage, which is not in her plans. Milady thought that if the goose laid golden eggs, her family could pay off all their debts and be free, although she has 2 younger brothers, so this is not the best idea. The heroine sighed in irritation because she was seriously thinking about golden eggs, although she did not need to waste time on illusions and should return to work. But suddenly, Senya saw a certain rider on a horse in the distance and wondered who was galloping along the road early in the morning. When the rider almost passed by the protagonist's house, she decided to ignore him, thinking that there was simply a fire nearby. However, the girl felt that the man stopped near her and got off his horse. This is Tessar, who appeared before Senya in his home clothes, with his breath caught and his eyes desperate. The main character, staring at him in bewilderment, wondered why he got off his horse and why he was heading towards her. The man approached her, and Milady, stunned, asked him who he was and what had happened. He reached out his hand to the farmer and, with tears in his eyes, said that he could not believe what he saw. Senya looked at him cautiously, thinking that he was simply mentally ill. The girl just wanted to ask the stranger what he wanted, when suddenly he fell to his knees in front of her. Tears started flowing from the guy's eyes, and the main character, in complete shock, thinks about what he is doing, and that most likely he is definitely not sane. Milady excitedly asked the gentleman why she was crying and whether he was accidentally injured. But then the man raised his desperate gaze to Senya and, nurturing some hope, turned to her. The farmer's wife, uneasy at the stranger's expression, said that he could come to her for help if he needed it. The gentleman, with his head down on the floor, while she did not understand why he was bowing to her. Suddenly the stranger began to beg her to marry him. The main character, in a daze, asked him if he had accidentally fallen from the oak tree. However, Tessar, looking seriously at the girl, said that he was going crazy about her. The protagonist, clutching the rake tighter, began to think about what was going on and why this crazy handsome man had come to her at the first rays of the sun, although she had more important things to do. But suddenly the man, continuing to burst into tears, declared to Milady that he would endure any of her blows, and even hatred, and would do everything for her. The gentleman reached his hand towards Senia's leg, desperately begging her to become his wife. But then the protagonist instinctively swung a rake at him, viciously calling him a pervert. Tessar received a blow to the head, listening to the girl's screams that he dare not even think about touching her. Suddenly, Senia's entire family came running to the cries of pervert. Her mother and father, who were armed with gardening tools, and even her little brother. But suddenly the family froze because their daughter's offender was about to beg them for something. The man seriously asked the farmer's parents for permission to marry her. Senya's mother, assuming that her daughter had finally come to her senses and decided to have a relationship, asked her if he was her boyfriend and why she was calling him a pervert. But she, blushing with anger, asked her mother not to be so stupid because she didn't even know his name and would never beat her boyfriend with a rake. Meanwhile, Tessar, rising from his knees, calmly told the farmers that his name was Tessar Nathan Adriel, and he was the one destined to become Senya's beloved. How the whole family of the main character began to wonder whether this was the cruel Duke Adriel that everyone was talking about, because he fits the description. Finally, the mother shook her head and declared that they were dealing with a mentally ill person, to which her daughter replied that that was what she had meant all along. The girl, asking her father to call the warriors here, sternly asked Tessar how hard he hit his head to pretend to be a vile duke. Then 2 more people ride up to the farmer's house on horses and ask them to wait and not do anything. Senia clenched her jaw in anger, not understanding what was happening in the courtyard of her own house. The red-haired rider rushed to the aid of the mentally ill man, while the other angrily asked the gardeners how they dared to treat the gentleman like that. Suddenly, the main character became depressed because she found out who these 2 were, which made her think that this was probably all just a joke. The girl assumed that the first one was the Knight of the Red Feather, and the second one, the one with green eyes, was that same brilliant magician. The latter was about to say, narcissistically, that everything was so, but suddenly a rake stick rushed towards him. The protagonist, continuing to believe that what was happening was just a joke, began to beat the magician, saying that if they dared to call themselves dragon slayers, then she would be the mother of dragons. Tessar told the farmer's wife that if she didn't believe them, then there was nothing else she could do, because they never pretend to be someone they are not. While the Duke and the commoners were engaged in their squabbles, an entire army was already heading towards them, riding on horses at the speed of an arrow. The main character, who had been punishing the liar with a rake all this time, froze at one point because she heard the noisy clatter of hooves in the distance. The Red Feather Knight thoughtfully told the Lord that it seemed the mounted cavalry had been a little delayed, but had already arrived at the scene. Senya's face broke out in sweat as it dawned on her that the men hadn't been lying to her all this time. The cavalry arrived at the farmer's house, where one of the riders immediately headed towards the Duke with a cloak in his hands. The king's mantle was placed on Tessar's shoulders, making him look as majestic as he should. Senia guessed that he was Duke Adriel. The Lord told the girl that he would woo her again and again, to which the beaten magician, who stood behind, asked His Grace what he was doing. The protagonist was even more shocked when she realized that His Highness was completely serious. The persistent man repeated his request to the farmer's wife to marry him. A couple of hours later, Senia showed up at school, but barely managed to escape from the people who pestered her with questions about her upcoming wedding. The teacher greeted her and said that she had heard the latest news too. The woman asked the farmer if she was really getting married, to which she thoughtfully replied that no one knew yet, and that it all seemed like a bolt from the blue. Yesterday, she and her mother sat down at the table in the kitchen, and decided to discuss everything with the Duke, and the girl asked him why he chose her. The protagonist sheepishly asked the gentleman if they had ever met before, to which the man replied that of course she didn't know him, and that she must have been frightened by the fact that he had come so suddenly and started asking for her hand. The young farmer asked in surprise why he had done all this then. Tesser said with pity that he was only asking her to marry him, and that he would give her all the riches of this world, even if she refused. The heroine's mother sternly told the man that she was flattered to hear this, but she would like to be sure that he would not change his mind after the wedding. His lordship said that if they wanted him to prove the seriousness of his intentions, he would take an oath in the church. Xenia and her mother were stunned and asked the young man if he was telling the truth, because if he broke such an oath, he would receive punishment, God's punishment. The main character immediately offered him a condition. If they get married and he breaks his promise or deceives her, then she will receive compensation in the divorce. The man was wary when the topic of divorce came up, but said that she should not worry about it, but if she wanted, he would mention it in the vows. The genius wizard, Bale, and his assistant, the Red-Winged Knight, are the only ones who were able to defeat the dragons, and Tessar, Nathan Adriel, killed his entire family to claim the throne. Remembering all this, the protagonist realized what a terrible person was asking for her hand. But Xenia got scared when the teacher asked her about the merchant's son, Mr. James, who kept asking her to marry him. She added that he had been looking for her in the morning and had even stopped by the school. The woman suggested that he would come after closing time, to which the main character stated that in that case, her school day would end now. The farmer's wife ran home as fast as she could because she had to get back there before she met him. But suddenly, she heard someone call out to her from behind, which made her stop and turn around because she realized that it was James, although she had been avoiding meeting him. The boy told Xenia that he was worried about her, then angrily asked if it was true that the Duke had proposed to her. She replied that it was true, and he did it this morning, and it was quite spectacular. Suddenly, James grabbed the girl's hand and asked if she had rejected him because she was supposed to be his wife, not Tessar's wife. The protagonist, trying to pull her hand away, thought irritably when she promised to marry him. The girl hit the offender on the head with a bag and ordered him not to touch her without her permission. The farmer's wife rushed away, but the offended James begged her to stop at once. As she ran away, the heroine thought about why the hell she should marry the merchant's son, because the fact that they are the only unmarried people in the village does not mean anything. That is why she wants to leave as soon as possible. Finally, she ran to the house, walked through the door, and announced to everyone that she had returned. Having met her mother, Milady asked where the Duke had gone, to which she replied that he was looking for a place to spend the night, and she sent him to his grandmother for the night. Xenia asked, stunned, if this meant he would be here tomorrow too, and her mother said that it was probably so, until she agreed to marry him. The mother told her daughter that after she left, the Duke said he would make her happy, and that she should not worry. However, Xenia seriously said that no matter how you look at it, he was crazy, and she wondered why Tesser chose her out of all the girls. Mom asked what difference it made, whether he was crazy or not, since the oath included a clause about financial compensation, to which the girl replied that that was exactly the point. The woman, hearing her daughter's words, said that now it seemed her marriage was not in question. But her daughter emphasized that this would only happen if they got married. Suddenly, the protagonist's father burst into the kitchen with her two brothers, who declared that they were against this marriage, but Milady asked everyone to stop. Some time later, Duke Tessar appeared on the threshold of the farmer family's house. The main character came out to him, and surprised by how handsome he was, asked how long he had been waiting there. He replied that he didn't remember it, because he came here as soon as he woke up. Xenia said that, in that case, he could have knocked. However, the man objected that he did not do this because he did not want to disturb her while she was sleeping. The girl agreed with him, mentally amazed at how this man shined like a star. Then the main character confessed that she wanted to tell him something about the wedding, to which the gentleman asked her if she agreed. The farmer's wife, her cheeks flushed, said that her answer now was no, but she was not so categorical. The Duke suddenly said that he was grateful to heaven for this, after which he burst into tears, to which Senya was dumbfounded, wondering why he was crying again. Surprised at what a crybaby he was, Senya asked his lordship to stop crying and calm down, because she still had one more condition. Tesser decided that Milady doubted his oath, so he asked if she wanted him to cut off his hand, but she asked him not to take it so seriously. The man then asked if she wanted him to build a castle, in her honor, an emperor's coffin, a dragon's heart, or anything else she wanted. Wanting to stop the gentleman, the heroine grabbed his hand and asked him to listen to what she would tell him. Tears froze in Tessar's eyes, and he looked intently at his beloved, which surprised her. She said that there was nothing wrong with that, he just needed to help her on the farm, because that was her family's desire, and then a week would be enough for him to convince her. The protagonist was pushed to do this by her father, who together with his younger sons, decided that the Duke should not treat their work with disdain. A soft smile appeared on his lordship's face, and he asked if this was all she wanted from him. The man said that he agreed if all the conditions of their agreement were fulfilled, and that she could tell him about all her desires. The Duke, having started working on the farm, told his teacher that he could feed the chickens, since it was not difficult for him to do so. Having completed this work, the young man said that he could still collect eggs, and also, in all seriousness, declared that he could persuade the hens to lay more. He also added that he had fixed the fence, which was slightly slanted, and had plowed the land. The heroine looked at him in surprise, and thought that he was holding up so well, even after the exhausting work. The girl suggested that he take a little rest, since there was no other work, but he said that he was not at all tired. Milady, thinking that the Duke could replace a whole high-quality agricultural machine, said that she would now look for another job for him. After some time, the farmer's wife decided to visit the gentleman, who was resting under the tree, and asked him if he was bored, just sitting there. The man replied that no, because time flies for him when he watches her. The protagonist bit her lip thoughtfully and asked His Highness if he wanted to go to the city with her, to which he replied that of course he did. Walking through the grove of trees, Senya asked the Duke if he had already settled into that little house, and he said that he was glad that it was close to her home. The girl turned around and said that she wanted to ask if the pillows and bed there were comfortable for him, since he was after all a respected duke. The man said he wasn't trying to win her favor and that he really felt comfortable there. The farmer's wife asked if that was true. His lordship's eyelids drooped, and he replied that he was in no way lying to her. Senya smiled and said that she was very glad to hear this, because she couldn't stand liars. Tesser told the girl that he was aware that she despised lies and intrigue. The main character looked at him in surprise, amazed that he knew so much about her. Unexpectedly, after my lady's words, tears appeared in the gentleman's eyes again. Senya, looking puzzled at the man's changed mood, wondered if he was really as bad as they said. The girl asked him why he cried so often, to which he, covering his face with his hands, said that he didn't know and that he only behaved like that with her. Senya, taking out a handkerchief, said that after his words, she felt like a terrible person. The farmer's wife reached her hand towards his face, and the man began to indignantly prove that she was not like that at all. But suddenly, the Duke fell silent when the girl gently wiped away his tears with a handkerchief. The protagonist regretfully said that she felt guilty when she saw his tears, so she asked him not to cry anymore. Then the worker decided to ask the man if he was sure that this was their first meeting. He said yes, and this is the first time she is so warm to him, and the first time he is so close to her. Senya, hearing about warmth, said with a smile that he probably used this word in a different sense, but the man added thoughtfully that this was the first time she had met him. The main character looked at him puzzled and asked what about him, but the Duke remained silent in response, And then the farmer's wife turned around and said that it didn't matter and she wouldn't bother him with questions anymore. Pointing into the distance, the girl said that this road would take you to the market and the school where she works, so she asked him if he wanted to go with her. Although there was nothing special there, he agreed. Then Senya fell silent, thinking to herself that she probably just looked like his previous lover. The friends set off on their journey. The protagonist suggested that the Duke first go to school because she needed to pick up her things, to which he said that he didn't mind. His lordship, watching the main character from the side, thought about the fact that he had met countless versions of her in his life. Finally, they came to the city, and then Senya asked the man to wait for her here until she returned, to which he nodded modestly. But suddenly, as soon as the farmer had walked a few meters, she unsuspectingly came across an alley behind which a certain man was waiting for her. Suddenly, waiting for the moment when Milady would be very close to him, he jumped out from around the corner and grabbed the unfortunate woman by the hand. However, Senya managed to react quickly and fight off her offender, hitting his arm painfully with her fist. The girl realized that this man was her boyfriend James, who really wanted to marry her. She angrily asked him what he was doing, but he, seething with rage, asked what she was doing there, indignant that she was arranging dates with others, although she had promised that she would marry him. The heroine, horrified that this man was waiting for the time when she would be left alone, declared that she would rather die of old age alone than with him. James, calling my lady a bad girl, swung his hand at her and shouted that he had only treated her well because of her pretty face. The protagonist, amazed by the man's impudence, was already preparing to defend herself, planning to kick the offender in the most painful place. But suddenly the girl froze in surprise, because before she had time to hit, something happened to James that made him go quiet. The farmer's wife saw Tesser grab the man's hand and squeeze it so hard that he howled in pain. Looking at the gentleman, who seemed to have become a different person, Senya realized that he was definitely the evil Duke everyone was talking about. His Highness, having humbled James with a murderous look, asked him who he had just dared to raise his hand against. The main character realized that she had already forgotten that Tesser Nathan Adriel is the same cruel man who justifies the rumors about himself. Suddenly, the girl found it very difficult to breathe, and she began to sweat heavily because she became afraid to watch this picture. But the Duke, noticing that Milady was uneasy, abruptly pushed James away and excitedly asked his beloved for forgiveness and whether she was frightened. A puzzled Senya replied that everything was fine. She was just a little surprised. The farmer's wife glanced at her suitor, who was struggling to catch his breath and trembling with fear. The Duke, meanwhile, asked the protagonist if she was hurt, then said that he had heard about her wedding and was taken aback because he could not imagine that she already had someone in mind. The girl thought that he had suddenly come to her with a proposal of marriage and was even surprised that he didn't know about it. The main character confessed to the man that there was nothing between her and James and asked him not to take it to heart, to which he agreed. The Duke thoughtfully told Milady that he would take her word for it, which made her cheeks blush slightly. Seeing that James had recovered from the shock, His Highness wanted to neutralize him again, but the farmer stopped him, asking him not to do so. The suitor, offended to tears, called Senya an old maid and said that no one would ever want to marry her and she should thank him. The protagonist was outraged that she saved this impudent man, and he still asks her to be grateful to him. She smiled artificially and asked James to continue his words and say what it was she should thank him for. Suddenly, Senya, smiling and clinging to the Duke's hand, asked her suitor if he realized that she would soon become a countess. James stared at the gentleman in bewilderment and asked what they were talking about. Senya repeated with delight that she was marrying Duke Tesser Nathan Adriel. Suddenly, the girl, looking into her fiancé's face, saw that he was looking at her with blazing flames in his eyes. The protagonist blushed embarrassedly and asked the man if it was true that he had recently proposed to her, hinting that he should play along with her. The Duke said that this was exactly the case and since she would be his wife in the future, he would do everything she could possibly dream of. Xenia laughed loudly and declared that in that case she would have no problem getting rid of one street rat now. His Highness said that she could do whatever she wanted, and then James really panicked. The farmer's wife asked the impudent fellow what he would say now that the Duke himself had allowed her to get rid of him. He, not wanting to get involved in problems, decided to run away before it was too late. When there was no trace left of the offender, the protagonist sighed with a serious face, not thinking of letting go of the Duke's hand. But suddenly, Milady caught herself thinking that she was still holding on to the man, which made her feel very awkward, and she pulled away from the gentleman. His lordship asked the girl whether she had decided whether to marry him or not, to which she modestly said yes. The young man reminded the farmer that everything was fine, and that he could wait and would also fulfill any of her wishes. Then he, looking down, sadly added that if she already had a lover, then he didn't mind, because all he needed was for her to marry him. The heroine suddenly wondered if she had misheard, because according to Tessar, he didn't care that she would belong to him only on paper. The man said that he was not asking her to love him, but only to marry him, but Xenia asked him to wait. She said indignantly that she didn't have a lover, but she still found it strange to hear it from him, so she asked why her. However, His Highness did not rush to answer, but first touched the girl's palm with his fingers. Tessar explained to Milady that this was the only way for him to protect her. The main character fell silent because she suddenly realized that she could no longer avoid answering, so she had to decide everything now. Taking the Duke by the hands, the girl said that she accepted his proposal of marriage. Xenia thought that she didn't know what Tessar wanted to protect her from and what secrets he was keeping, but she was completely sure that he was her destiny. The man told Milady that she seemed to be serious this time, to which she replied with a smile that she was. The heroine asked him if he really wanted to marry a simple village teacher, wondering if Tessar would cry again. But to the young lady's surprise, the Duke, smiling dazzlingly, said no, because he had been waiting for her for a very long time. Xenia said that she was afraid of letting him down, because she didn't know etiquette, to which he said that he would kill anyone who laughed at her. The girl, embarrassed by his beautiful smile, asked him not to talk like that. The main character's father and younger brother could not contain their delight when they saw the transformed Xenia. The girl appeared before them in a new luxurious outfit and a cute hairstyle, which made her really look like an important lady. The brother added that she was so beautiful in that dress that she was almost unrecognizable, but the farmer's wife said that she always looked beautiful. Milady said that she was glad that she was going to the palace not alone, but with her family, to which her mother added that the Duke himself had suggested it to them. The heroine remembered how His Highness told her that her family could also move to his estate, and he would take care of their safety. Thinking that Tessar had made many enemies, she said with a grin that her wedding would not affect anything, but her mother said that this was somehow cruel. The wind blew, and Xenia, raising her head to the sky, asked herself if she would be able to leave the village after the church confirmed their marriage. But suddenly, the maid told the main character that Duke Tessar had arrived, and she turned her head in surprise. She saw that a whole cavalry of knights on horses had arrived at her house, accompanying the master. His lordship himself, looking with inspiration at his future bride, told her that he had come to take her away. Xenia thought he looked like he was about to cry. She wondered when he would stop being so soft. She said she had been waiting for him. Some time later, the protagonist and the Duke arrived at the Church of the God of Order, where their wedding ceremony would soon begin. The newlyweds sat down on chairs, and the priest opposite them said that first they needed to check their statements. But the farmer suddenly realized that she was being haunted by a strange feeling. She thought it might be because of the long trip and stress, but when she went to church as a child, she felt sick to the point of tears. Meanwhile, the priest, as if nothing had happened, asked the bride and groom to extend their hands to him. The couple complied with his request, after which the minister began to read a prayer in an unknown language. As soon as he touched Senya's hand, it began to radiate a pleasant light, which seemed to penetrate the bride's body. Everything around Senya disappeared, and she suddenly heard someone's voice, which seemed so pleasant and familiar to her. The voice asked the confused girl if she would find her happiness this time, then asked her not to forget, but what exactly Milady could not hear. But then the farmer's fiancé brought her back to reality, looking into her eyes, calling her several times, and then asking if everything was okay with her. The stunned heroine was at a loss for words at first, but then asked the men if she had done anything wrong. The Duke replied that she was not, but she sat still, so he thought she was not well. He asked the bride how she was feeling. She said she was fine, thinking that it had felt like an eternity had passed. But in reality, it had only been a moment. The priest told the newlyweds that their marriage had already been concluded, after which he asked them to remember that the God of order was always watching over them. For some reason, the servant's words echoed inside the main character, causing her to stare at him in surprise. Immediately after the wedding, the couple headed to the carriage, where the groom asked Senya if everything was okay, and apologized for not having prepared the rings. The girl asked in surprise why he kept apologizing, then said that she could wait for the ring until the wedding because she was a strong woman. Tesser, holding out his hand to the lady to help her climb into the carriage, said that she was so agile that she could jump onto a tree from the second floor. The farmer's wife, holding out her hand and blushing, asked him in surprise how he knew, and the man said that he had seen her climb a tree and run away from the school the first time they met. The bride, having sat down with the Duke in the carriage, asked how he could have noticed this, to which he replied that he had managed it miraculously. Senya said with embarrassment that she wouldn't do that anymore, wondering if swordmasters were capable of such a thing. His lordship smiled and said that he had no objection, and on the contrary, he would like to see this side of her. He asked if she was good at climbing trees. The Duchess said that even so, but if she did this on the estate, there might be rumors that she was behaving inappropriately. The gentleman agreed with her, but suddenly someone's voice came from the open window, irritably calling Tessar a henpecked husband. It was the court wizard Bael, who was riding on a horse very close to the carriage. The knight asked what it was, to which he asked if he was not right. Bael glanced at the Duchess with a hint of disdain, but she, noticing this, only smirked. The wizard rode on, sighing with displeasure, but the Duke asked his bride not to pay attention to him. The girl laughed and said that everything was fine, and especially since he had gotten it pretty good from her during their first meeting. She then added that Bael reminded her of one of her friends, noting that they even had the same personality. But then Senya remembered that same gentle voice that she had seen in the church and wondered if she had imagined it. The girl was overcome by weakness, after which she fell asleep, which the Duke noticed and looked at her with alarm. Some time passed, and the main character was awakened by a light touch from his lordship. The lady admitted that she had accidentally fallen asleep, then asked the groom when they had arrived, saying that he could have woken her up earlier. The man said they had only just arrived, and that he had originally wanted to carry her, but thought it would be rude without her consent. The Duke got out of the carriage, telling the bride that she could take her time and tidy herself up, but she objected that she did not need that much time. But as soon as the protagonist looked at what was happening on the street, she could not contain her admiration. At the entrance to the luxurious palace, the entire working staff came out to greet her, and Tessar, looking at her kindly, invited her into his new home. All the subordinates, seeing the master, bowed their heads and congratulated him on his arrival home. The main character was so surprised by this that what was happening seemed like a completely different world to her. The guy with the bangs asked His Highness if this was the girl who was supposed to come with him, and he said that yes, and they needed to take care of her. Senya, looking at her fiancé, realized that his face and voice had noticeably grown colder. Meanwhile, the guy with the bangs bowed to the Duchess and said that his name was Solette Northcliffe and that he was the head butler of this mansion. Solette asked the lady to follow him to her room. The Duke told Senya that it was already quite late, so she could go and rest. While the heroine was following the butler, she could not stop turning her head from side to side because she was very amazed by the beauty and sophistication of the palace. The farmer's wife entered the room where Soleil and two maids followed her with her luggage. The girl was surprised not only by the double door, but also by her room. The first thing the lady noticed was a huge luxurious bed with a bunch of pillows. The girl couldn't stop admiring this beauty, and the butler, as if nothing had happened, asked her to let him know if she needed anything. The guy then told the lady that these were her two personal maids. The maids introduced themselves to her with a smile as Mia and Daisy. Soleil told the Duchess that he was saying goodbye to her for today, but she could contact him tomorrow, and if she wanted, he would give her a tour of the palace. The heroine said that everything was fine, then turning to her maids, said that they could go and wished them good night. Suddenly, the girls loomed over her, menacingly offering her to take a bath after such a hard day, to which she asked them to show her where the bathroom was. However, the maids ignored the mistress's request and began to pull off her clothes, which completely outraged her. Then the subordinates put the farmer in the bathtub and began to soap her while the girl drowned in embarrassment. When the bathing procedures were finished, the maid, smiling sweetly at the lady, said that it was now time to go to bed. The protagonist washed from head to toe and, exhausted, agreed with the girls. When the maids left, the heroine looked at her skin and was surprised at how clean and soft it was. Her maids did a great job. But suddenly, Milady's eyes lit up with an idea that had come to her when she had just entered her room, so she immediately decided to implement it. She plopped down on her new soft bed, declaring that she was simply delighted with it. Wrapped in a blanket, she began to spin from side to side, very happy with these soft sensations, as if she were floating in the clouds. The girl was so happy with her new bed that she didn't even notice how someone knocked on her door several times, so she was a little embarrassed. The Duchess opened the door and was about to ask who had arrived at such a late hour. Behind the door, the bride saw a thoughtful Duke with rosy cheeks. She asked how long he had been standing behind the door, apologizing for not hearing him. The man said he had just arrived and that he just wanted to make sure she was comfortable there. He admitted that he was glad to hear that she liked the bed so much. The heroine almost burned with shame because it turns out that the Duke heard her delighted squeals. He said that he could change the bed for a wider one. The indignant girl asked him not to say anything else because she would most likely die of shame. The Duke frowned and asked Senya not to say that because such words caused very negative emotions in him. The protagonist angrily explained that she had no intention of actually dying because that was not what she had meant at all. From the dull look in His Highness's eyes, it was clear that Milady's humorous remark about death had touched him to the quick. But then the lady said she should be ashamed of herself for being caught at the worst possible moment. Tesser asked if she really enjoyed it so much, to which she replied that she was delighted as hell. The farmer's wife asked the groom if he wanted to talk to her about something, to which he replied that he did. Then the Duchess invited him to come in for a minute. The couple sat down opposite each other, and the Duke asked if she needed anything else besides bed. She smiled sweetly and said that everything was fine, but asked if she deserved all this. Suddenly, his lordship told Senya Sunset Hill in a stern voice that she deserved it more than anyone else. The protagonist's eyes widened in surprise, and the man added that in this world, everyone has the right to ask for what they want. The Duke told his beloved that she should not even think about it and should not be shy about asking for more, because everything he has belongs to her. The Duchess said sheepishly that the more she talked to him, the more she understood what he was trying to say. His Highness lowered his sad gaze and asked the girl for forgiveness. Senya said he had nothing to apologize for, and if he had something to say, he should do it gradually. She asked if he had hired new people for her. He told the bride that this was so, and that he had chosen those who could be trusted, and that these were the butler, Soleil the maid, Nana, and a few more people whom she would get to know better over time. The farmer's wife said with a smile that Solette and Nana must be trustworthy. The knight agreed and added that for him, these people are ready to put their throats under the knife instead of his. He is sure that they will be a good support. The heroine smiled and thanked the gentleman for taking care of so many things for her, joking that in the future she would be the one thanking him. Suddenly, Senya saw that tears were welling up in his lordship's eyes again. She excitedly asked the man why he was crying again. Tesser apologized and said that he did not mean to cry, but the girl, wiping away his tears, asked him to calm down and promised that she would always be with him. The heroine, placing her palms on the man's cheeks, said that she did not understand what he wanted to tell her, but he was handling everything perfectly. The girl said that she was telling the pure truth, to which the Duke looked at her with an inspired look, then said that he thought he knew everything about her. The protagonist blushed and thought that this was true. He even knew her clothing size, but she asked what he was getting at. Tesser explained that he had not known she could touch other people so easily. The farmer then quickly backed away from him in embarrassment. Rubbing her hand, the lady tried to justify herself by saying that it was because she had many younger brothers, and if he didn't like it, she wouldn't have any more. But His Highness suddenly smiled tenderly and said that on the contrary, he wanted her to touch him more often. The heroine looked away in embarrassment, happy about such relief, and be that as it may, asked him not to cry anymore, because others might think otherwise. The Duke reached out his hand to the girl's palm and said that he didn't care at all. Senya looked at him in confusion, and the gentleman, without touching her, said that he had been sitting with her for too long, so he would go to bed. Several hours passed, and the night in the kingdom gave way to a clear and warm morning. The maid Daisy, looking the heroine straight in the eyes, said that the master said that she did not like tight clothes, so she chose looser things for her. While beautifully braiding the lady's red hair, she added that if she wanted to change clothes, she would prepare another outfit for her. When Senya's image was ready and the girl looked at herself in the mirror, she exclaimed that she could not even imagine that clothes could change a person so much. Mia told the Duchess that it was all because she was very beautiful, and it was a pleasure to dress her, and she now did not regret leaving her previous job. The farmer's wife asked the servant if she had left her previous job to get a job here as a maid, to which she replied that the Duke's men had come to them themselves and said that they would pay a lot of money. The girls were gossiping about various topics, but suddenly a butler appeared in the room, frightening the maids, and asked the lady what she wanted for breakfast. When the protagonist sat down at the table, Solette asked her if she wanted to join the Duke for dinner, to which she said yes. The girl then asked the lady if she would mind hearing a story about this house and her duties, and the lady said that she had long wanted to know. Then the butler invited the lady to go into the garden, and when they arrived there, all the palace workers watched the newly minted Duchess with a smile. Her Highness looked at the flowers in the garden and did not hide her sincere admiration. An hour later, Soleil and the main character decided to return to the estate, where the latter examined each room, in the palace of which there were quite a few. The butler decided to ask the lady if she would like to take a little rest, to which she said that everything was fine, and they should make it in time. Following her subordinate, Senia thought that everything was not as she imagined. She thought that they would hate her here, but everything was different. The Duchess has a hard time getting along with the butler. She doesn't know what Soleil thinks of her, but she doesn't seem to dislike her. Entering the next room, the lady asked the butler how long ago she knew that she would come to this house, to which she said that after the owner became a duke. Looking around the large office with a huge library, the protagonist admired this beauty and asked if all this had been prepared since then. Soleil told the girl that if she was asking whether all this had been prepared for her, then yes, and all the palace workers were waiting for her arrival. Senia went to her desk to examine it, and at the same time asked the girl if she had been waiting for her arrival too. She replied that she did, and that the master had given them an order for which he must have had his own reasons. The heroine, thinking that the butler was somewhat similar to Tessar, said that she simply wanted to get to know her better and apologized for her intrusiveness. The subordinate bowed her head and said that it was her duty, and her word was an order. Xenia, approaching the next door, said that she was counting on her help and would like to put in the same amount of effort in preparing everything for her arrival. The lady asked if this was the last room for the day, to which Solette said yes, and it led to the master's library. The farmer's wife opened the door slightly and looked in, asking if she could take a peek. Entering the room, the butler said that, of course, it was possible because she was the duchess of this estate, and this was the owner's office, where he usually worked. The main character, looking at the blank sheet of paper, smiled at the fact that her fiancé was left-handed. Then she noticed the books, The World of Gods and The Legend of the Golden Warrior, on the table, which surprised her a little because she didn't think that Tessar liked to read such things. Meanwhile, a small boy approached the butler, and she started a conversation with him. Solette turned to the lady and said that she needed to leave for a while, to which she agreed, and warned that she would be in her room. But suddenly, the butler for some reason fixed her intent gaze on the duchess, which puzzled her a little. The subordinate and the boy bowed their heads to Xenia and thanked her for allowing them to leave. At this moment, the farmer fell into a stupor because she did not know how to answer them and what to do next. Left alone in the room, the main character thought that in fact, nothing special had happened. But for some reason she felt strange. When the girl was already thinking about returning to her place, she noticed something out of the corner of her eye that really caught her attention. It was a kind of dagger, glowing with magical light, which was covered with protective glass. When the lady approached the artifact to examine it closer, she did not even notice how someone appeared behind her. It was Duke Tessar, who without saying a word grasped the girl's wrist as she reached for the dagger. The man apologized to his beloved, but asked her not to touch the weapon. The girl asked forgiveness for her liberty, and Tessar explained that everything in this house belonged to her, with the exception of this. The main character turned to the groom in embarrassment and said that she didn't know about it. He said that there was nothing wrong with it. It was just that this knife was dangerous. It was cursed. Xenia was very surprised to hear about this and asked the gentleman why he had not hidden it then. The man thought for a moment, then said it was just insurance. The Duchess asked him if he wanted to curse someone with it. His Highness smiled kindly and asked the girl not to touch him anyway, because it would hurt if she simply touched the glass. The farmer's wife said that she understood him and that she didn't really want anything to happen to her. Suddenly, the young man looked intently at his bride, and she asked why he was looking like that. The protagonist was very embarrassed and surprised when Tessar, calling her darling, said that this outfit suited her very well and that she was incredibly beautiful today. The girl said that it was thanks to Daisy and Mia, and she heard that he brought them from the capital. The Duke said that her maids were very kind to her, to which the girl replied that they were indeed good people. Xenia smiled and admitted to her groom that she was worried, but the others were just as kind to her. The man said he was glad about it, then asked if she enjoyed the food, to which she replied that she did, and ate more than her stomach could hold. Tessar then admitted that he wanted to have breakfast with her since it was her first day at the mansion, and the lady said that they could have lunch together. The man was silent for a few moments, then asked the bride if she would like to have a cup of tea with him after dinner. The Duchess happily said yes, thinking that he had proposed to her not long ago, but in other things he was more cautious. Sitting opposite each other with cups of tea, Tessar confessed to the girl that before they got married, he wanted to ask her something. The man explained that the title of Duke obliges him to hold a grand wedding, but it will be quite uncomfortable, so he wants to shorten the ceremony. Xenia, taking a cup of aromatic tea in her hands, asked what would happen if he did this, and asked the groom to answer honestly. The gentleman's gaze turned cold, and he said in a menacing tone that he would get rid of some people who were against him. The girl thought with embarrassment that he was probably going to kill them, then said that she didn't care. But wouldn't it be better if as few people as possible knew about their wedding? The farmer's wife smiled and reminded Tessar that he himself had said that the wedding was his way of protecting her. The knight said that, in that case, he would invite only those who would not object to the wedding. His Highness admitted that he had not thought it would be such a hassle, so he asked the bride if she was sure that everything would be okay. The girl, having taken a sip of the hot drink, asked if there would be anyone at the wedding who would want to take her head with them. The man asked threateningly if anyone would dare to do such a thing, to which Senya asked if he suspected anyone enough to be worried. The main character was very surprised when the gentleman said that this was his younger sister. The girl jumped up from her seat in shock and exclaimed that she had never seen her before. The Duke said that she was now in the mansion and would come when they were married. The farmer's wife sat down on the sofa, thinking that she had previously believed that Tessar had killed his entire family, but that he had left behind a younger sister. Tesser said that his sister hated him very much, but reassured the bride because, in his opinion, it would not affect her. To which the Duchess said with a smile that then she did not see a problem in this. However, the man thoughtfully said that their first meeting would take place right at the ceremony, so he was not sure that everything would be fine. He told Senya that he would then register her as the daughter of a northern border baron, to which she agreed, and asked if she needed to obtain high status. The lady asked if there was anything else she should know, to which the Duke suddenly became quiet and looked away in embarrassment. The protagonist began to worry and wonder why Tessar suddenly turned red. Finally, the first words were heard from the Duke, which he uttered very hesitantly. Lips. Senya, perplexed, asked what he was talking about. Tesser, sweating and blushing with excitement, told the bride that they would have to kiss on the lips during the ceremony. The girl asked shyly how they were supposed to do it, to which the young man anxiously asked if she would mind if they kissed. The Duchess, blushing like a tomato, said that everything was all right, but one thought made her heart tremble. This would be her first kiss in her life. Senya looked at her fiancé, who was beside himself with embarrassment, and wondered why he was so shy. Wanting to lighten the mood, the main character told Tessar that his cup was empty, then grabbing the teapot, poured the gentleman some tea. As soon as she poured the drink, the young man immediately drank it all in one go. Senya, dumbfounded, told the groom that the tea was actually very hot, to which he, getting up from the sofa, said that everything was fine. The farmer's wife worriedly told the knight that he didn't look well, but he looked away and said that he was fine. However, the girl still noticed how red his ears were. His lordship said it was quite late, so he would go to his room. But as he approached the door, the lady called to him, which made him start. The girl wanted to ask him about the kiss, and His Highness, without turning to her, promised that he would do everything possible to make her like it. The man's words made the main character blush and smile, and Tesser, as if nothing had happened, said that he would go to his place. When the protagonist was left alone in the room, she modestly smiled at her fiancé's words that he would do everything to please her. There was a week left before the wedding ceremony, the preparations for which took up all the mistress's time. The servants asked her about flowers and decorations. Today is the day when people from the most famous boutique in the capital will come to Senya. When they arrived, the butler looked in on the girl and informed her the seamstresses would take her measurements, according to which they would sew her wedding dress. Two maids followed the Duchess, who complained to them that she was already tired. Daisy told the lady that she would be able to get a good night's sleep today, and the lady, preparing to go into the room with the people from the boutique, agreed with her. But as soon as the main character looked into the office, she froze, because what was happening there surprised her. All the workers in the boutique, including the owner, for some reason stared at her with disdainful glances. The protagonist walked boldly past the people, now guessing why Mia and Daisy had dressed her up today. The owner of the boutique, Sparkling Water Sparrow, greeted the Duchess enthusiastically and said that his name was Lacarne. The man looked at Senya and asked if she really was the Duchess, and admitted that she was much more beautiful than they said. The main character smiled falsely and asked if it was true that the rumors had spread so quickly. The servants led the lady behind the screen, and Lacarne said that rumors from the north did not reach the capital, so they knew nothing about her, And before they learned of her origin, there were even dirtier rumors. A boutique employee asked the Duchess to raise her arms so she could measure her waist and was surprised that the lady was not wearing a corset. She said that she was happy with her body, without a corset, guessing the reason for this annoying conversation. They took her for a commoner. The worker told the protagonist that she should tighten her waist a little, since narrow waists are now in fashion in the capital. The farmer's patience snapped. She was not the kind of person who would silently endure everything. The girl, grinning maliciously, suddenly asked the seamstress what her name was. She looked at the lady in surprise and asked her again, to which the lady repeated her question. Before the seamstress, Sarah, could say her name, the Duchess snatched the measuring tape from her hands. Xenia measured the waist of a boutique employee and exclaimed that hers was a whopping 27 inches, while she only had 24. The main character sarcastically thanked the girl for her advice and asked if she would have told the emperor's daughter the same thing if she had been her client. Having mentioned Sarah's name once more, the Duchess promised that she would remember her because she was too brave and honest for a dressmaker. The seamstress asked the madam for forgiveness, but Xenia irritably asked Mia to take her out. Wanting to apologize, Sarah extended her hand to the bride, but she ordered her not to touch it. Just at that moment, the owner of the studio came running to the ladies. Lacarne reflected that he had looked down on Xenia as a common country bumpkin, but she turned out to be quite hot-tempered. The man said that his employee had made a mistake and he would find a replacement for her, thinking that he needed to be more polite with the bride because he really didn't want to fall out of favor with the Duke. However, Xenia irritably ordered everyone to get out of there, and she doesn't care how much their studio knows. Lacarne, smiling sheepishly, told the lady that they hadn't yet finished with the measurements, and that they were also the best clothing manufacturers in the capital. The heroine, looking at the man with a menacing glance, said that they had nothing to worry about, and if they left now, she would not report what had happened to the Duke. The owner and employees of the Sparkling Water Sparrow studio were so taken aback by the lady's severity that they no longer objected. After some time, an agitated Duke came to the farmer's wife and called out to her. Xenia turned to him in surprise and asked why he had come to her and shouldn't he be working now. He asked the girl if it was true that those people had treated her rudely, then said that he had already gotten rid of them and that they would not be able to sleep peacefully at night anytime soon. His Highness was about to leave, but the bride stopped him and asked where he was going and asked him not to take revenge on everyone anymore. But the young man said that the studio workers dared to show disrespect to the future Duchess, for which they would pay with their lives. Xenia said irritably that she knew he would react that way, but asked why they had to take their lives right away. The girl said that she would sort everything out herself because it was her responsibility, after which she allowed the groom to return to his work. The Duke agreed with her and said that in that case, he would not deprive her of such pleasure. The protagonist nodded to him, mentally embarrassed by his words about pleasure. The master left, and Xenia, thinking that Tessar looked upset, asked her maids Mia and Daisy if they still communicated with their old colleagues, and they said yes. When the maids said that they had good relationships with their former colleagues and that they still communicate with some of them, Xenia had an idea. Meanwhile, Lacarne's excited servant looked into his office to tell him some news. The director of the studio, having just seen the woman in the doorway, angrily jumped up from his chair and asked if this had happened again. The maid bowed to the master and said that unfortunately it was so. Duke Broomhauer had cancelled his appointment. Lacarne threw the maid out of the office, shouting at her to ask how many people had cancelled their appointments that day alone. He ordered her to find out what had happened. Left alone, the man was going crazy with the thought that people were canceling their appointments one after another, and if this continued, he would lose clients. The studio director desperately shouted that he would definitely find the one who so brazenly dared to interfere in his business and ruin his life. Suddenly, a certain Mr. Volderick appeared in the room and told Lacarne that judging by the way things were going, he would not be able to pay him again. The businessman was scared, but the man reminded him that the things he had ordered took up the entire hold of the ship, and in addition to the fabrics, there was his personal order there. Realizing that Lacarne would not be able to pay him for all the goods he had ordered, Boldrick brought people with him, whom he ordered to take everything from the director's office that could therefore be sold at a high price. Lacarne desperately asked him to stop, but he told his friend with a smile that he didn't even know who had gotten him into this situation. Balderic wondered who this nice lady was, who had made such a businessman go bankrupt. At this time, Daisy informed Senia that the Sparkling Water Sparrow studio was losing customers and would soon close, which surprised her greatly. The maids, while dressing, Senia said that Lacarne's advice was too irritating, to which she replied that they were simply putting on a show of feelings. When the main character's wedding look was finished, she looked at herself in the mirror to the delighted cries of Mia and Daisy. The farmer was very surprised by her transformation. She realized that she could buy a whole village for this dress, so she decided to call it Village Number 1. Suddenly, the girl saw in the reflection of the mirror one guest whom she immediately recognized. The joyful Duchess turned to her fiancé and asked him if he had come to see her and asked how she looked. But Tessar suddenly froze in place and stared at the girl with a fascinated look. But then the gentleman confidently walked towards the lady, which surprised the maids very much, and the main character thought that he was about to burst into tears. His Highness, gently squeezing the Duchess's palm, kissed the delicate skin on it. The maids and workers of the studio, seeing this touching picture, became embarrassed and blushed. Tessar, smiling tenderly, told the bride that she was as beautiful as always, but today she looked so beautiful that he could not take his eyes off her. Senia, with a blush on her cheeks, said that it was great, and she couldn't believe how attractive she looked. While the maids were melting with embarrassment, the heroine asked the groom to look at all the dress options for her and help her choose the best one. The maids wondered who was the boss in the house, when the master answered the girl that he would of course help, because she was an important person. When the fitting was over, the dressmakers bowed their heads and told the Duchess that it was time for them to go. During all this time, His Highness never helped, because no matter what dress she wore, he gave her the same stunning compliments. The protagonist said goodbye to the workers and thanked them for their help, then said that the wedding was finally tomorrow, to which the groom agreed. Senia, sitting down opposite the young gentleman, asked him why he was looking for her. Tessar blushed and admitted that he wanted to see her in a dress. The girl said in surprise that he must be busy these days. The man said that the staff at her previous studio had been rude to her, so he wanted to make sure that she was treated differently here. The Duchess told him that their sales had declined, and that in any case, Lacarte's business had failed, and Tessar, looking down thoughtfully, agreed with her. But suddenly the main character asked the gentleman in bewilderment whether he had accidentally had a hand in this. He said that he had done nothing, to which the girl reminded him that he had intended to do something to them. The man then admitted that he had prepared something in case she was unable to take revenge. Tessar added that he would always be like this. He would not forgive anyone who harmed her in any way, even if it was a small thing. So he asked his bride not to allow herself to forgive anyone. However, Senia sternly asked him what if he himself was the person who would offend her. It was noticeable that the lady's words made the gentleman think hard. Tessar reached out and touched a strand of Senia's hair with his fingers, saying that he had become a man she could not forgive. The Duke looked at his bride with a gentle, intent gaze and added that he had become the man who still yearned for her. The protagonist wondered what the man had done that she could not forgive him, for then realized that she had accepted so many valuable things from him. Senia squeezed the master's fingers and decided that from the moment he accepted her, she could do whatever she wanted, although their relationship was built on an agreement. Tessar stared in surprise at the lady who wanted him to stop handling her so carefully, as if she were fragile as glass. The heroine angrily told her fiancé that no matter how hard she tried, she still couldn't understand because she didn't know much about him because of their relationship. His lordship asked the farmer's wife what she thought about their relationship, after which she became deeply thoughtful. Xenia looked at the groom and asked him how he felt about friendship, but said that she understood that it was a little strange. But suddenly, the main character noticed that Tessar was looking at her with a terribly pitiful look. The girl excitedly asked him not to cry now, but to just answer her question. The Duchess asked him not to take her opinion blindly, but the man, bowing his head, sadly said that if that was what she wanted, then he had no objection. The gentleman, smiling at the bride, said that he was not against it because he liked her. The farmer's wife grinned and said that was great, then suggested that they remain friends. The lady also invited Tessar to shake hands, and he went to meet her. Xenia declared that it was very nice, then calling the man her dear friend, asked him to take good care of their ceremony tomorrow. As soon as the girl said this, Tessar remembered that he still had to perform a kiss, which made him wildly embarrassed, and turned away. Time flew by very quickly, and the long-awaited day of the Grand Duke's wedding arrived in the capital. The bride and groom, holding hands, were preparing to walk down the path together. The girl admitted that she was nervous, but he said that everything was fine. The young man admitted that he was also nervous, but Xenia asked him to calm down, because it would be even worse if both were worried. The Duke promised his bride that he would not make any mistakes and asked her not to worry. The main character looked at him with inspiration, mentally asking herself not to be nervous because she would enter there as a duchess. Finally, the doors opened for the newlyweds, and the protagonist realized it was time to go forward. The young bride and groom, in chic outfits, walked through the hall full of guests. The couple reached the wedding altar, where the priest allowed the husband to kiss his wife. The Duke, with careful movements, lifted the bride's weightless veil and threw it over the girl's head. As His Highness leaned towards Xenia's face, the lady, closing her eyes and surrendering to the moment, felt her heart pounding wildly in her chest. The lips of the man and the main character merged in a short but very tender kiss. When the ceremony was completed, Tessar, stepping back from the bride, looked at her with an enchanted look and a blush on his cheeks. The girl, seeing such an expression on his face, thought that he was about to cry. Meanwhile, the priest continued his speech, where he needs to proceed to the next one, after the bride and groom have said their vows. But suddenly, an uninvited guest burst through the doors of the ceremonial hall. The noise was caused by a small girl with black hair, who walked forward with ragged breath, while excited servants ran after her. The main character looked at the young guest in surprise, and the Duke said that it was a girl named Serendaya. Suddenly, the little girl, looking furiously at the newlyweds, shouted at the top of her voice that she was against this marriage. Here, Xenia remembered that this was the same Tessar's sister he had spoken of earlier. The girl noticed that she looked very much like her brother. The maids, grabbing the rebel from both sides, began frantically explaining to her that she should not behave like that, but she repeated that she was against this marriage. The maids tried to calm the enraged little girl, but she, twitching in all directions, screamed that such a marriage simply could not exist. The protagonist, looking at the girl's indignation, thought that this was a completely normal reaction when an aristocrat takes a commoner as his wife. But suddenly, Serendia shouted that her brother would not allow anyone to live happily, and she could not allow him to ruin the life of an ordinary girl. The Duke looked sternly at his sister, and Xenia was dumbfounded by the fact that it turns out this little girl was worried about her and not about Tessar. Finally, his lordship ordered his subordinates in a cold tone to take Serendia away. Even when the child was taken out, the door, one could still hear squeaky indignation about the inadmissibility of this marriage. When the problem was resolved, the priest, with an awkward cough, declared, "Tessar and Xenia, husband and wife." Some time later, when the wedding had moved into the entertainment part, the Duke apologized to his wife for ruining the wedding ceremony. The girl admitted with a smile that she did not expect that something like this could happen. so she thinks that it is like a wedding present. The man said he was afraid that this might happen, so he didn't let her in until after the ceremony, but he didn't know that she would just barge in. Senya asked anxiously if this meant he had locked Serendia in, to which he replied that he had simply asked her to stay in her room. The Duke, looking at his wife with a trembling gaze, said that today she looked even more beautiful. She thanked her husband for the compliment and said that she had put a lot of effort into it and hoped that she had made a good impression on others. His Highness told the girl that she did not need to worry about others and that he was always on her side. Senia chuckled and said that she should at least greet today's guests. As she stood before the crowd, the bride thanked everyone for coming that day and said that she hoped they enjoyed the ceremony despite its early end. Some more time passed, and his lordship, going out onto the balcony, greeted the farmer's wife and said that he had been looking for her for a long time. The girl greeted him and said that she just went out to get some fresh air. The groom asked if she was really so uncomfortable that she needed to go outside, to which she laughed and said that was not the case. Tessar asked if that was true, since she had recently been surrounded by a crowd of girls asking questions, and Senya had said that they were simply congratulating her. Suddenly, the main character drank all the champagne that was in her glass at once, and the gentleman asked in surprise if she was really okay. The lady said that everything was fine, because she was not sensitive to alcohol. One glass did not make her drunk. Then she asked her husband what about him. He said that he doesn't drink, and the girl looked at him and said that it was great. The protagonist wanted to say something, but suddenly her thoughts were interrupted by a shrill child scream. Looking around, the heroine saw a little girl, Serendia, hanging on the edge of the balcony, about to break loose and fall down. The young gentleman and his bride rushed in shock to the little girl who was in danger, while Senya frantically tried to explain to the girl that she needed to stay put. Tessar, without wasting a minute, deftly climbed over the balcony fence. In an instant, the man managed to jump to another balcony where the little girl was hanging. The Duke grabbed his sister by the clothes with one hand and pulled her up, although she kept screaming at him not to touch her. Finally, the girl was saved. She sat down tiredly on the floor, trying to calm her ragged breathing. His Highness, having humbled his sister with a cold look, asked her what she was doing. But Serendia asked her brother, offended, who had asked him to save her in the first place, to which he asked if he should have just watched her fall. Little one said that it would be better if it were like that than if she got help from him. The main character, watching the quarrel between these two, thought that they were still typical brother and sister. Tessar asked the girl to behave calmly and promised that he would now call the servants who would take her away, to which the little girl said that it would be better if he had not brought her at all, since he was going to do that. Serendia furiously asked her brother why he had called the servants and locked her in the room. His lordship, remaining calm, asked the little lady not to scream so loudly and reminded her that she was no longer a child. In response, the girl only looked away with tears welling up from anger. Seeing this, Senya was very surprised, because in this, she was so similar to her brother. Then the farmer's wife called out to the two and asked the groom if he would catch her if she jumped down now. Before Tessar had time to ask what she meant, the Duchess suddenly elegantly took off her shoes and lifted the hem of her dress and climbed over the fence. His Highness looked at his bride in bewilderment and asked what she was going to do. Preparing to jump, the main character asked Tessar with a smile to catch her, although she was sure that she would easily jump over anyway. Before the man could answer, the girl immediately darted into the air. The Duke rushed towards Senya with lightning speed, mentally begging her not to do such stupid things again. However, the protagonist seemed not to listen to him and flew forward, rejoicing at this moment like a child. The girl reasons that this is even closer than jumping onto a tree from the window of her house. Senya managed to land softly, right into Tessar's chest, wrapping her arms around his back. Serendia watched the young Duchess's charming maneuver with fascination. Senya excitedly told the Duke that he was simply incredible, that he was able to catch her so deftly. But suddenly, the heroine realized that something was wrong with Tessar, and looking at his face, noticed that he was looking ahead, as if he was enchanted by something. The protagonist began to worry about him, but the man taking the lady in his arms said that he was fine, but asked her not to do it again. The farmer's wife asked with a smile, why? Because it was quite fun, and she would not have hurt herself, because she was confident when she jumped. However, the Duke, struggling to hold back tears, admitted that it brought back many memories for him. The main character became even more worried about her fiancé, thinking that he was about to start crying again. Xenia, seeing that Serendia had been watching them all this time, asked Tessar to finally let her down to earth. The young Duchess, standing up, tried to persuade his lordship that she could put on her shoes herself, but he did not listen to her and put the shoes on the girl himself. The little girl, watching this for some reason, whispered in surprise that this could not be. Then the protagonist quickly fixed her hair, which had already become disheveled. After this, Xenia, looking at the little girl with a smile, politely greeted her and said that they had never been able to get to know each other properly, and gave her name. The protagonist wanted to get closer to Serendia, but she suddenly moved away from her as if sensing some kind of danger. The farmer's wife looked at her puzzledly and thought that at first she seemed like a strong-willed girl, but up close she was completely different. The lady then noticed blood on the girl's hand and realized that she had cut herself while hanging. Sitting down closer to the girl, the Duchess took her hand to examine the wounds and asked if she was hurt anywhere else. However, Serendia couldn't let the girl get that close to her and hit Xenia on the fingers, causing them to go limp. The main character smiled at the girl and thought that it seemed like she was avoiding her, just like she did her brother. The lady explained to the worried little girl that if nothing was done, there would be scars on her beautiful hands. Then the Duchess, turning to her fiancé, politely asked him to bring some medicine, as Serendia needed to treat her hands. The man looked at her in surprise and asked if she was really talking to him right now. Her Highness, looking at the young man with a menacing gaze, said that yes, with him. The Duke immediately rushed to carry out the order of his wife, who thanked him for his help. When Xenia and the little girl were left alone, the latter asked the lady, dumbfounded, what she had done to her brother. The girl calmly replied that nothing like that, then asked if she meant that she had sent him for medicine. The bride apologized to the child for taking her hand without her permission and asked if she could see her other hand too. The farmer's wife, examining the palm, asked the little girl if she was against their wedding and asked why. Serendia told the heroine that she too would become unhappy next to this man, and there was no need to deceive herself that he was doing everything for her. With her head down, due to tears, the girl admitted that she had once been deceived too, and Xenia thought that she could hate him because he had destroyed her family, but he had his reasons for doing so. The protagonist thanked Serendia for her concern, but said that she had already promised to marry him, and that could not be changed. The young lady, struggling to hold back her tears, said that she knew about it too. The main character said with a smile that she simply had no other choice, although she of course could have shouted, "I'm against it," just like she did. Looking again at the tearful Serendia, Xenia was once again convinced of how much she resembled her brother when she cried and held back her tears. The farmer's wife hugged the girl without further ado, because she knows that when you are a child, a lot of things upset you. Serendia fell apart even more, and mumbling something unintelligible, buried herself in the girl's warm embrace. The Duke, who just then appeared before them with medicine in his hands, simply watched the girls. Some time passed, but the little lady still could not move away from the main character, so she followed her everywhere, holding her hand. Returning to the ceremonial hall, Xenia said that she was surprised that while they were on the balcony, the wedding banquet had already ended. His Highness decided that he was to blame for this, so he apologized to the bride for causing her inconvenience. Serendia was still hiding behind the lady, who told her husband that everything was fine and nothing terrible had happened. But the man's gaze dimmed, and he said that it all happened because of him. so he asked the girl not to worry because he would fix everything. Then his lordship told his younger sister that she would remain here today and return back to her home tomorrow. The protagonist, who simply cannot help but worry about her husband's only sister, asked him why he was asking her to leave so quickly. But suddenly, the little girl said resolutely that she would not leave the farmer's wife, and the Duke, hearing this, turned to her in surprise. The girl angrily told her brother that she would not go, but would stay here because he, as always, would not care about her, and then he would still call her back. Malaya continued to glare at Tessar, and Senia said with a smile that there was nothing she could do about it now, especially since she had always dreamed of having a younger sister, so they would have a lot to talk about. Still, the gentleman agreed with his wife, only telling her that she could send her back whenever she wanted. However, the main character offendedly asked the gentleman if he didn't think he was wrong. He asked in bewilderment what it was, and began to question the lady about what he had done wrong. Senia explained to him that Serendia would stay here as long as she wished, as she too was part of Adriel's house and part of the family. The Duke told his wife that she was right, after which the latter asked the little girl with a smile if she had heard it. The protagonist turned her attention to Serendia, happily offering her to live in peace. Duke Tessar watched them, but then, taking a deep breath, he turned away as old memories from another life before his reincarnation came flooding back to him. In this memory, he, being in the forest, suddenly sees Senia jumping at him from the bushes, dressed in a work suit and with a sword in her hand. The man was very surprised to see the girl, so much so that he froze in place, not even hearing her warning to step aside. However, the young man did not have time to dodge, and the flying lady landed right on the man, who in turn fell onto the grass. But what happened next made Tessar's heart flutter. The girl, with a beaming smile, apologized to him and joked that she didn't mean to use him as a pillow. Senia extended her hand to the man to help him up, as he remembered that in this past life, she was the Empress. Suddenly, the couple heard people shouting that the Empress had escaped again, and they needed to go looking for her, which made the girl realize that she was caught. Having thanked the stranger for his help, the main character said goodbye to the man with a smile. At that moment, Tessar very much wanted this girl to run away so far that no one would hear anything about her again. But soon, he met her again in the palace. Having introduced himself to the lady, he said that he had come to her to inform her of everything. Senia, the Empress, a girl who looks like a doll. She is a commoner who became a ruler, and she is also the weak point of the imperial family. Just like last time, the Duke wanted to see only the smile of this charming beauty. The lady in the man's memory thanked him for his help that time, when suddenly he woke up from his sleep. Rising from the bed, the young man tiredly grabbed his head with his hands. The knight again remembered the moment when Senia, leaning on him, smiled brightly. The man, gathering his strength, realized that this was the beginning of a long journey. After some time, the alchemist Bael came to the Duke's office, asked him why he was so gloomy, and asked if everything was okay with him. He replied that he was fine, and then asked his friend if he remembered what he had asked him for. The alchemist threw the very item he had asked for on the table, a ring with a red stone. Bael joked that he thought he wouldn't ask. The magician said that he had made this ring from the dragon's heart, as he had requested. He asked the Duke why he needed such a powerful sacred ring. Tessar, looking thoughtfully at the decoration, said that this was his desperate measure to postpone the inevitable end as long as possible. Bael wanted to ask what he meant, but the young master only ordered him to start developing weapons against evil forces already. The wizard asked what he was talking about and admitted that he was acting stranger than usual. Tessar, rising from his chair, said that he still would not believe him, that this world would soon perish. Bael stated that, as he had said, disasters happen every 200 years and are usually natural disasters, but asked if he meant something else. However, Tessar, having humbled the magician with a piercing gaze, told him that it would be better if he did not tell anyone about his guesses. A few hours later, the Duke, walking along the corridor of the palace, suddenly heard incomprehensible cries from Senya and his younger sister, who kept repeating that she would not eat the food. But the main character, grabbing the girl and putting her on her shoulder, said that she was 13 years old and she was so skinny, and this was no good because she had no strength. Serendia shouted at the girl that the whole problem was that she was too strong, and all 13-year-old girls were like her. The farmer, having seated the little girl on a chair, explained that the problem with her thinness was that she had no strength, although she should be resilient and independent. However, the next words made Serendia think. The lady said that she should at least jump onto the railing the first time. Senia said kindly that she herself was upset about this, so she agreed with the girl that she would start eating little by little. The young lady could not find any arguments, so she calmed down and agreed with the lady. The little girl, overcoming herself, began to eat little by little, which made the Duchess very happy. But suddenly, Senia noticed that Tesser had entered their room. She asked the man in fear when he had managed to enter, to which he replied that he had just now. The heroine asked him when it was, in his opinion, and the Duke said that he entered when she was holding Serendia in her arms, which made her blush. But suddenly, the girl jumped up from her chair and said loudly that she had already eaten everything. Then the little girl silently walked past the married couple and went about her business. Senya asked her husband if he could be more affectionate towards her, since she was his only younger sister. He said that he could if she wished, but he didn't understand whether this was a request or an order. Suddenly, a moment from his memory flashed in Tesser's mind, where he tearfully asked someone for forgiveness. The girl asked her husband to try for this, because she is very worried about this girl. The man told his wife that they seemed to have become friends, to which she, smiling happily, agreed with him. That same memory flashed before the Duke's eyes again, where he confesses to Senya that he had greatly offended her. But then the gentleman handing the girl that very magic ring said that it was for her. The main character was very surprised when she saw a gold ring in His Highness's palm. Tessar said that she could consider it a wedding gift. The girl said that he had already given her many gifts, but when he put the jewelry on her finger, he said that it was made especially for her. As soon as the ring was on the farmer's hand, she suddenly saw that it began to emit a strange bright light, and the lady also felt that the ring seemed to shrink to fit her. The protagonist was even more surprised when this magical light completely covered her entire body. Senia glanced at Tessar in confusion when she realized that everything around her had become a little quiet. His lordship, looking at the girl with a piercing gaze, asked her never and at all costs to take off this ring. The Duchess agreed and promised the man that she would always take care of him. Tessar once again remembered the moment from his past life, where Senya, equipped with armor in the middle of a fiery battlefield, asks him for forgiveness. The girl in the memory turned to him and smiled, and he told her that the only thing that mattered to him was that she survived. However, in the man's memories, his beloved failed to survive, and now he understands that he cannot bear her death again. Some time later, the heroine, spending time with Serendia at a picnic, thought about the fact that she had a feeling that she had given the Duke an oath, not a promise. But then the girl noticed that the little girl was only pretending to eat her delicious sandwich. The farmer's wife took the girl's sandwich and ordered her not to play with her food. The protagonist then asked Serendia what she wanted to do, to which Serendia cautiously asked why she was asking that. Then Senya jokingly suggested that she beat up her brother or get into trouble so that at least some emotions would appear on his indifferent face. But suddenly the little girl, looking down, sadly said that she didn't care about a person like her brother. The Duchess asked with a smile if she was lying, because her mood immediately improved in his presence. A little girl, holding a cup of tea in her hands, sadly asked the main character why he killed everyone and left only her alive. The young lady admitted that she knew that her brothers had a bad relationship with each other, and nothing could be done about it. Serendia, bursting into bitter tears, desperately asked why he did this even to his parents. Through her crying, the little girl said that it would be better if he killed her too. Senya, hearing this, began to hug the girl to calm her down. Tessar Nathan Adriel is an infamous dragon knight who murdered his entire family for a position at court. The main character wondered if he really needed this position. It seems to her that this simply cannot be. Only one thought comes to her mind. This is all because of her. The Duchess hugged the girl tighter and thought that he would not do that to her. Some time later, the farmer's wife decided to ask the butler if His Highness had a reason to harm not only his brother, but also his parents. However, the subordinate surprisingly did not immediately answer the question, which caused an awkward silence between the girls. The protagonist continued speaking. Serendia told her that only Solette knew about all the circumstances and asked her if she could explain it to her. However, she again did not deign to answer the lady's question and continued to remain silent and watch. The farmer's wife asked her subordinate why she still served the Duke, since in her opinion, she did not look like she was working for a man she did not like. Finally, Solette spoke and told the lady that she owed her life to her master. The girl then asked Sania if she was worried about the fact that she had some feelings for the Duke. The heroine sheepishly said that she was not asking her about this, after which Solette, bowing her head before her, asked forgiveness for her insolence. The protagonist told her subordinate that she had just apologized, but not from the bottom of her heart, and that she knew that she didn't like her at all. But Soleil told the lady that she did not hate her, to which the Duchess added that she was not very friendly towards her anyway. She was always testing her. The Duchess told the butler that she knew that she had specifically said that Tessar's dagger could not be touched in his office. Her Highness asked Soleil to forget for a while that she was her mistress, and to answer honestly what opinion she had formed of her. The butler told the lady that according to general criteria, she was not very suitable for the role of Duchess. The main character nodded calmly and said that she thought so too. But suddenly, the butler added that she understood why Madame Senia was so necessary to the master, and why he had been waiting for her all this time. The girl then admitted to the lady that it was true, that she had not trusted her before, so she asked to be punished if she felt uncomfortable about it. Senia asked her not to talk nonsense, and said she was glad she didn't hate her. She asked if it was so important to her to know what people thought of her. The main character told the butler that she would of course like to be friends with her. Solette liked the lady's words, which caused her lips to stretch into an almost imperceptible smile. She told the protagonist that in time this would be the case, and then Senia also smiled happily. But then the butler told the hostess that she would like to add something regarding her first question. The farmer's wife was stunned when her subordinate revealed that the Duke's mother, Madame Anna Maria, was alive. Several hours passed after these events, and the city was plunged into dark night. The main character, comfortably settled on a large bed, was quietly snoring. But then the Duke appeared silently nearby and wanted to very tenderly touch the sleeping girl. However, the lady felt this and sleepily opened her eyes and looked at her husband. The young man awkwardly apologized to her and said that he did not want to wake her, but was just going to look at her for a moment and leave. She, tiredly rubbing her eyes, said that it was okay, then asked if he hadn't said that he would work a lot this week, so she asked if he had finished yet. But the man, without taking his gaze off his wife, admitted that he simply missed her. Senia smiled tenderly and said that it meant that he finished his work early, only because of her. Suddenly, His Highness, feeling confused, silently crossed his fingers. The protagonist, sensing his agitation, blushed and began to stare at him intently. But a tear rolled down Tessar's cheek, and he told the farmer's wife that he had simply had a very bad dream, and that he really only wanted to look at her. The main character watched the gentleman's emotions for a long time, then invited him to sit down next to her for a while. But suddenly, the Duchess caught herself thinking that she was inviting her husband to her place, although she was in bed. The girl sheepishly clarified that she was asking him to sit next to her for a short while before leaving, and that she didn't mean anything like that. The man said that he understood this, but for him it was an absolute exception. He simply could not allow himself to sit on her bed. Tesser added that he had not thought of anything like that, to which the young lady said that it was not the case anyway, and the gentleman asked if she was cold. Before the protagonist could answer, she suddenly grabbed the young man by the hand. Senya, with flushed cheeks, asked her husband to sit down and threatened that if he refused again, he could go back to his place. His lordship excitedly apologized to the girl, to which she ordered him to stop apologizing already and quickly go to her. Blushing in embarrassment, the young man slowly sat down on the edge of the bed while Senya kept her gaze fixed on him. The protagonist, noticing how much His Highness's cheeks and ears had turned red, smiled modestly. Suddenly, the man felt his wife's hand on his shoulder, pulling him back. Tesser fell onto the sheet, directly across from his wife, who said she had always wondered if he always slept this badly. The girl asked the man if he slept so badly that after waking up, he was full of nightmares. His lordship was embarrassed and fell silent, and the main character joked about him being a great duke and suffering from nightmares. The gentleman admitted that this had been the case lately. The farmer's wife asked if this had been the case even on the day he had come to pick her up. The young man winced, but then thoughtfully replied that it was true. Suddenly, the protagonist reached out to the man's face, causing him to become wary. Touching Tessar's temple with her fingertips, the main character asked him if she was in his nightmares. Here the Duke, passionately burying his face in his wife's palm, like a kitten, said that she is in every dream of his. Senya stroked the young man on the head and promised that in that case, she would try not to appear in her dreams anymore, and he laughed. Suddenly, the heroine, before saying something, asked her husband not to misunderstand her, and the man made it clear that he was listening to her attentively. The girl asked her husband if he would feel better if she slept next to him. Tessar's eyes widened in surprise at such an unexpected and delicate proposal. Senya's cheeks turned red from embarrassment, but she told the gentleman that he was tired and advised him to at least get some sleep today. Suddenly, His Highness jumped out of bed with a flushed face, but said that he understood her correctly. But Tessar said, in fear, that he was worried about one but, to which the main character said that in that case, he did not have to agree. The sweating man told his wife that this was the first time she had ever said such a thing, to which Senya indignantly asked whether it wouldn't be even stranger if she had already said something like that. Abruptly covering herself with a blanket, the Duchess irritably asked her husband what they were going to do, then repeated that she was not insisting on anything. Tesser looked at the lady in fascination, but did not dare to contradict her anymore. The young man lay down opposite Senya, but his cheeks were still burning with embarrassment. Then the Duke noticed that the farmer's wife was looking at him very intently, as if she wanted to say something, so he turned on his side towards her. The girl confessed to him that, to tell the truth, she was waiting for him to ask him something. The gentleman said that in that case she could write him a letter, but the lady objected that this conversation was not at all for letters. Then Senya asked why he lied to Serendia since his mother was still alive. After the girl's words, His Highness suddenly fell silent. Looking into her eyes, the main character asked if she had asked something inappropriate, to which he said no, because she had the right to know. The man said that it was true that his mother was alive, but there was no way his younger sister could know that. The Duke explained that this was his mother's wish, to live as a man who had left this world, so he was fulfilling her request. The main character, listening attentively to the young man, opened her mouth in surprise. The protagonist stood up abruptly and told her husband that even if that was true, he had no need to receive hatred from Serendia. However, Tesser asked if that was the case, what was worse, thinking that your brother killed his parents, or finding out that your mother actually killed your father? Having heard the real truth, the main character fell silent, and the young man calmly looked at her and smiled. But then the Duke, gently twirling a lock of the bride's hair around his finger, said that all that remained was to choose one of the two. But he was already a fratricide. Senya lay down on the pillow, and looking the man in the eyes, said that she still believed that he should not be a villain. The girl added that Serendia would not feel better if she thought that he had done all this, but he simply looked at the lady with admiration. The main character noticed the gentleman's intent gaze, and blushing slightly responded in kind. His Highness continued to stare at his wife with a look full of love, while the farmer's wife felt like she was about to sink, which upset her because she so wanted to see Tesser fall asleep. The next morning, the protagonist suddenly opens her eyes in shock. Right in front of her, she saw a smiling duke, who, calling her darling, asked if she had slept well. Sania, looking at her charming husband, was embarrassed by the fact that since the morning she had seen a face that was harmful to her heart. The girl, blushing with shame, asked the man if he had gone to bed at all, hinting that the whole night had passed, and he looked as fresh as a cucumber. He turned to her and said with a smile that he had never been in bed for so long. The heroine said that it was good because he looked less tired, thinking that it seemed like he had been watching her while she slept. Suddenly, the farmer's wife noticed that her whole face was burning, which made her cover it with her hands in embarrassment and think that she probably looked so ridiculous. The Duke asked his wife to start preparing for breakfast, then said that it was time for him to go. The farmer's wife was indignant that it turned out that he shouldn't have stayed so long, to which he replied that he simply had unfinished business. Senia, wondering why Tessar should act like a person who lives for today, told him that this is actually called overexerting himself. The gentleman, looking at his wife with a warm gaze, told her that she was, as always, tactful, after which he warned that he would return soon. But suddenly, His Highness blushed and fell silent, as if he wanted to say something else, but was embarrassed. The girl looked at him in bewilderment, but the man still decided to ask the girl if she would mind if he touched her forehead with his lips, which made her instantly blush. The heroine, thinking about why her husband was so modest since he had already touched her lips, replied that if he wanted, then she was not against it. Tesser, kissing the lady tenderly on the forehead again, called her dear and wished her a good day. During the day, Senia and Serendaya went out into the city for a walk. The girl bought 2 hairpins in the store, one of which she gave to the Duchess. The Duchess thanked her and praised her for counting the change correctly. The lady offered the child to put a new decoration on her hair, and she agreed. Now Serendia's cute hairdo was decorated with a bright hairpin. The same precious hairpin adorned the main character's fiery hair. Senia excitedly told her little friend that she was having a lot of fun and suggested that they sometimes walk like this, and she happily agreed. The little girl told the Duchess that she had gone to the salon with her mother before, but this was her first time in such a place, and she really liked it, which also made her happy. But suddenly, the girls came across a crowd of townspeople who were watching one man asking another to get lost because he couldn't pay the money. The merchant angrily shouted at the man that they had been trading in this place for several decades, and he couldn't just kick them out. The tenant, a young man, asked the shop owner what he expected if he couldn't pay the rent for the place right away, and even made a fuss. The man said that such a high rent was absurd because they themselves did not earn that much here. But the tenant again advised him to get lost. Senia, watching this, overhears the townspeople talking about how this is happening again. These people have recently driven out other successful merchants. A man in the crowd let it slip that those tenants buy the building outright when they find a good place to rent it, and added that he thought it was unreasonable. The main character decided to ask the strangers if this happens often, but at first they were frightened by her sudden appearance. An old man explained to the girl that this was a recently famous union of merchants. They buy land and buildings with good management and raise the rent. The farmer's wife asked what kind of trade union this was, to which the grandfather replied that they said it was known in the area around the port of Sistina. The union was called Melibia, and its leader was called Boldericus. The protagonist is outraged to no end by the fact that they use the name Melibia, which means to be blessed by the goddess of the sea. Watching the scandal unfold, the Duchess was overcome with Spanish shame that a union of merchants under the name of a deity was engaged in such affairs. But at one point, the girl ordered the tenant to stop, and he, hearing this, turned in her direction in surprise and asked who she was. The main character casually said that she was the mistress of Adriel's house. The tenant shuddered on the spot and began to discuss what the Dukes of Adriel, who owned these lands, were doing here. Meanwhile, the shop owner's wife threw herself at Senia's feet and desperately asked her to listen. The lady firmly explained to the union members that she understood that they were demanding unpaid rent, but she did not think that they could force people to pay in this way. The lady asked if they didn't have a separate organization that dealt with this, to which the man replied that they handled everything themselves without litigation. The tenant repeated that the store owners simply had not paid what they owed, but the seller's wife tearfully declared that this was simply an unthinkable amount of money. The merchant looked down and said it was a reasonable amount, but the woman shouted that the rent had increased 5 times in a day, which was simply impossible. However, Senia sternly said that it remains to be seen whether such an increase in rent is legal. The tenant asked, confused, if the owner's desire alone was not enough, since they had many people willing to pay even that much money. The protagonist silently frowned and thought that his words were true, but such an increase in rent was unfair to people. The girl understands that it is not desirable for just one union of merchants to concentrate in its hands almost all the trading points on their lands. Senia thought about what she should do now because she had not studied all the laws in detail, and the union of merchants was wary of something because they also did not mention the laws. Suddenly, the tenant asked the Duchess not to get involved in such a complicated matter and suggested that she take better care of something else. The farmer's wife became eerily quiet when the man smirked and advised her to take care of the Duke's farm, for example. Realizing that she was being openly ignored, the heroine furiously declared that she considered this rent to be unlawful, and therefore she wanted to sort it out. Sometime later, the Duke, sharing dinner with his wife, told her what he had heard about what had happened that day. The girl was very surprised by this, although she assumed that he would find out about it. After all, news spreads quickly. The man admitted that he had heard from Solette that she had gotten herself into something difficult today. But Solette, looking at him with disappointment, said that if he was going to scold her, then he shouldn't even start. However, the gentleman, smiling warmly, said that he had nothing against it, and he could not hinder her actions. The main character said that this happened because she got angry, although she doesn't know if she chose the right way. Tesser said that if it was a procedural matter, there shouldn't be any problems, then asked why she was worried. The protagonist shared with her husband what she had found out in more detail, and it turns out that the increase in rent is not regulated or normalized in any way. The Duke looked down thoughtfully, as the lady said that she did not want to make an unfair decision, but if they sided with the union, then such actions would become the norm. The young man agreed that it was not an easy matter, but he had one but. The Duchess looked puzzled and asked what he meant. His Highness smiled sweetly and told his beloved that everything would be fine because she would succeed. Senia, watching him with embarrassment, that even his crying face has power over her, and when he smiles like that at all. The girl said it was a strange way of supporting him, but thanked him for it. He said she could use it if she needed it. The lady admitted to her husband that she had already used his name enough, but asked if he could help her, and he said that he would be happy to. When the protagonist asked him to come to her office after the meal, Tesser's eyes narrowed in a smile, and he said that he would do so. Then the man's cheeks turned red, and bowing his head, he wondered out loud how long it had been since they had done this. The main character fell silent in bewilderment, but then told her husband that this would be her first time. The Duke's face froze in a weightless smile, and he raised his head looking at the girl. Senia, smiling tensely, added that this was only true if it had happened that way in his dream. The lady then stood up abruptly from the table, told the man that they would see each other later, and then walked towards the exit. Tesser looked at the lady with regret, remaining seated at the table alone. Later, Senia, sitting down in a chair opposite her husband, with a book on law in her hands, asked what kind of union of traders Melibea, headed by Boldericus, was. The man explained that they had been around for a long time, but had only succeeded so much thanks to the current leader. When he took over the union, they changed their name. His Highness also added that the Melibea ships are famous for never sinking. The girl said that if this were true, then they could only earn money by transporting goods. The young man said that they used to be involved in transportation, and he doesn't know if it's true or not, but they are connected to the goddess of the sea. Tessar suggested that they would only become more influential in the future, but the Duchess wondered how that could be, and wondered out loud why this alliance was playing with money, taking away trading places. Suddenly, the gentleman's gaze turned cold, and he cautiously asked his wife to stay away from the union if possible as soon as he finished this matter. The main character looked at him in bewilderment and asked why all of a sudden. The young man told his wife that he wanted to fulfill all her wishes, but he did not think that getting involved in a union was a good idea. The girl said in surprise that even so, but asked what if she herself wanted it. Tessar said that if this is what she wanted, then he would not stop her, but if they tried to harm her, then he would have to deal with them. The protagonist jumped up from her chair and indignantly reminded the gentleman that he had promised her not to interfere in her affairs. The young man agreed with her, and then the lady, having calmed down a little, asked him not to worry because she would win in any case. Pointing to a certain point in a law book, Senia said that she had just found something she could use. Tessara became interested and told his beloved that everything would be fine. Then he asked if he could help her find something that could dispute this. Senia, spreading her arms at her sides, happily declared to her husband that she would allow him to do this. Some time later, a large crowd of dissatisfied residents gathered around the building where the trial of the union would take place. The main character, looking at the crowd in surprise, asked Soleil if all these people were really victims, to which she nodded. Just in time, the owner of the store and the tenant himself, whom the Duchess was going to interrogate, showed up at the meeting. She looked at the man with a stern gaze and said that she would not delay for long and would immediately get down to business. The girl told him that she had looked at the contract which he was supposed to provide her by noon today, and the materials explaining the reason for the rent increase. Senia asked if she understood correctly that the reasons for the rent increase were the cost of external and internal reconstruction of the building and the change in the original value of the location of the shops. The young man said that this was true and added that the rent reflected the cost of repairs and the amount of expected profit in the event of opening a new store. At this moment, disgruntled cries could be heard from the crowd of people who accused Melibea of having thrown them out and even forcing them to pay. However, the protagonist, remaining calm, offered the tenant to clarify something. She asked if it was true that the contract had recently been extended. The man, smiling modestly, said that this was true and that they were trying to renew old contracts. The Duchess then hinted that there were no clauses in this contract relating to charging money for repairs and the like. He asked if this was not an exercise of the self-evident right of the owner of the building, and if someone did not agree with this, then they should vacate it. The heroine realized that the tenant did not take her seriously when he began to explain to her the most ordinary rules, thinking that she did not understand this. Meanwhile, the man told the lady that he understood that she understood the laws, but they had to take into account that they would be paying more taxes. Amidst the furious shouts of the crowd, a member of the union told the Duchess how much money could be collected there, while she too smiled tensely at him. Senia then told the man that she had no idea he had so much enthusiasm for paying taxes, and in that case, she had come up with something. Smiling venomously, the girl told the young man that she would like to check his account books. The tenant, who had not expected such a turn of events, swallowed his tongue in shock. The Duchess added that she had to work out how much more tax they could pay and wanted to see the books now. The tenant was hit with two problems at once: huge tax collections and his tax evasion. The lady said there was something else that had not been checked, but the man whispered to her that they could show her their confession as a bribe. But the union member was speechless when Her Highness reminded him that there was a restriction on the ownership of land and buildings for speculative purposes on these lands. The lady sternly asked the man if he could bring documentary evidence that the rent increase was not speculation. He said, in fear, that he would bring them tomorrow. But Senya said that he also needed to bring the account books, and they would send one person with him. The Duchess, smiling kindly, told the tenant that she did not think it was possible, but asked him not to even try to deceive her. Having finished the survey, the heroine rose from the table, asking everyone present to continue working in their previous places and to pay the rent that they had paid before. Senya's cheeks flushed as she walked past the crowd of victims, who enthusiastically thanked her for the justice that had been restored. After this event, the tenant told what had happened to Boldyrik himself, the head of the Malibian Merchants Union, who said that it was quite interesting. Meanwhile, the main character returned to her palace, but even there she continued to sort things out with the union. Balderik arrived to see her, introduced himself with a smile, and said that he felt a little awkward because this misunderstanding had caused their meeting. The girl, frowning in disappointment, said that if the head himself decided to intervene, then the union really had big problems with the account books. While the head's servants were bringing books into the Duchess's office, he said that even if business was conducted transparently, if you looked for shortcomings, there would be no end to them. The man then told the Duchess that he would provide her with the account books, as she had requested. The protagonist indifferently asked the gentleman if he had any other business with her. He said with the same grin that he wouldn't call it business, but simply wanted to ask her about something. Senya was shocked when the head of the union asked her what she thought was the most important aspect of his business. The main character was so surprised by this question that an awkward pause arose between her and the man. The lady replied scornfully that even if times and circumstances change, some things remain the same. He looked at the lady with interest and was surprised that she, it turns out, meant justice. The girl added that she thinks that the lands are managed not only for reasons of generating income, but suddenly, the man, smiling broadly, cried out that he knew it, to which the lady, frightened by his reaction, asked what he was talking about. Balderik told Senya that she didn't need the account books, then admitted that they had raised the rent for profit. The main character said warily that people who conduct trade in good faith are losing their profits, and such actions are unpleasant to her. But suddenly, the eyes of the union enthusiastically asked the lady, "What about considering this an investment?" When the puzzled Duchess asked what he wanted to invest in, the previously smiling Balderik looked at her with a sly look, stating that it would be very vague to call it an investment in the future of the world. The young man said that he wanted to call it a gift for the new mistress of the house, Adriel. At this time, the excited Duke was hurrying to Senya's office, arguing that he could not have imagined that Balderik would show up in person. For His Highness, this life is beginning to be more interesting. Many events are happening to him for the first time. His wedding with the farmer, his touching hands, all for the first time, and the man is very angry that changes can lead to the destruction of chains of events. As soon as Tessar approached the door leading to his wife's office, the smiling head of the Malibia Union came out. He bowed his head before the gentleman and said that he could not even imagine that he would be able to meet even the Duke today, after which he introduced himself. He, without taking his gaze off the man, asked if they had decided everything with Senya. He, with a strange smile, said that his wife was pleased and promised to try to ensure that they would not have to see each other again because of such nonsense. Then Balderik walked around the Duke and hurried out of the estate while the Duke followed him with his eyes. After some time, Tessar asked the court alchemist if he could always completely protect ships from storms using magic, and he said no. His Highness, looking thoughtfully out the window, said that let's say ships always remain unharmed during a storm, then asked if it was true that Balderik had received a blessing from the goddess of the seas. Bael said that it was possible, but still one time, a ship with gunpowder exploded and sank, But if this is true, then the goddess opened a safe path for him. The Duke, looking down, fell silent when the alchemist asked if something had happened, and if the matter with the head of the Melibea Union had not been resolved. Tesser suddenly stated that the Earth was not Baldric's original goal, to which the wizard asked what his true goal was. His lordship did not answer, but his silence spoke for him. He suspected that the reason for these actions of Balderic was Senya. The young man began to seriously consider whether he should get rid of this man as soon as possible, but he remembered that he had promised his wife not to interfere. Then the Duke ordered Orten, the knight who stood next to Baal, to put the head of the Union under surveillance, and to appoint the most skilled one for this job. The Lord then ordered Baal to strengthen the coastal defenses and prepare a large barrier, convincing him that it would soon return, which surprised him greatly. The magician asked if it was true that it was coming back. After that time, to which Tessar, still looking out the window, said that then there would be a year of peace. After meeting with Balderic, Senya was busy working in the palace library. At one point, she got confused while solving a complicated math problem. She used to work in accounting, but now it is not easy for her, probably because the amounts have become more complicated and larger. The lady was so absorbed in her task that she did not notice her husband approaching her from behind, watching her with love in his eyes. At one point, the man decided to give the girl a hint to make it easier for her to decide, but he did it so unexpectedly that she shuddered and became frightened. The Duchess began to look around in bewilderment, while Tesser apologized to her and said that he did not mean to frighten her. Senya sheepishly said that it was nothing serious, and she was just too carried away. She asked her husband if something had happened. He, carefully sitting down on a chair next to the girl, began to talk about how, after she arrived here, they had not gone out anywhere together. With enthusiasm shining in his eyes, the young man invited the lady to go for a walk as soon as she finished her business. The main character, thinking that he was asking her out on a date, said with a smile that she couldn't refuse him. After this, the Duke began to give his wife advice on solving the problems she was solving. But at that moment the lady looked only at Tessar. The protagonist thought that, after all, a pen suited him better than a sword, but then wondered if she was just thinking like that because she was in a good mood. The farmer's wife took into account His Highness's advice, thanks to which she managed to solve one problem herself. The gentleman, smiling happily, said that she was a very quick thinker. However, the lady became sad because she suddenly realized that she was not pleased with his praise. The Duke was dumbfounded and looked at his wife in bewilderment when she asked if he had taught this to anyone else before. The man, in shock, tried to string together two words in his defense, but the girl realized that this was true, which made her upset. The Duchess told her husband that it was not she who had asked him out on a date, and that she was upset that he was constantly thinking about someone else, and she had noticed this before. His lordship excitedly told the lady that he thought of no one but her. Tesser fell silent, and the main character, without saying a word, began to drill him with a contemptuous look. The gentleman was startled when the Duchess said that it looked as if the one he was thinking about was definitely not her. Senya, looking at the man, wondered when she had started paying attention to this. Previously, the girl didn't care if Tesser thought about someone. Previously, she didn't want him, but his patronage, and he became a good chance. Suddenly, the protagonist realized that she probably started paying attention to this after that day when they spent time together on the bed. Senya took what she wanted, increasing her abilities, but she wonders if she really wanted to take possession of something else when she owned everything. Thinking that she was probably just very selfish, the girl raised her hand. She held it out to Tesser's face and touched it just slightly, causing him to look at her with a stunned expression. The lady was in no hurry to remove her hand, while the young man, with complete regret in his eyes, said her name out loud. The heroine, thinking that she still loved this look of his, said that it was she who first suggested becoming friends. His Highness, with a touch of sadness, confirmed that, yes, that was exactly what she had wished. Senya, frowning, said that in that case they should move on to the next stage, but warned that she did not like men who thought about others. Duke Tesser panicked causing his body to tremble uncontrollably. The man said his wife's name again, while she thought that she especially liked it when he was so enchanted only by her. The farmer's wife smiled softly and told her husband that because of this, she suggested postponing the date until later since he already had a lot to do. Having collected all her things, the Duchess rose from the table, but Tsar, without taking his desperate gaze off him, asked for forgiveness. Xenia looked at the man almost indifferently, waiting for his next words. Then Tsar, having calmed down a little, added that he had no excuses. Then the protagonist, turning her back to her husband, reminded him that he was not going to tell her about what had happened to him before. His Highness looked down at the floor, and at the same time, a tear rolled down his cheek. Xenia, not paying attention to him, thought that if she hadn't said anything about it, then he probably wouldn't have known what it looked like from the outside. Without turning to her husband, the main character assumed that she had been too harsh just now, but she knew that this conversation had to happen someday. The Duke suddenly froze when the girl spoke about how they would still have time to drink tea together. The lady turned to him with a smile and asked if he would help her with her studies, even if they did not go for a walk. He paused awkwardly, then replied that yes, after which he slowly rose from his chair. The man remembers that in fact, in a past life, they were just a student and a teacher, and the Duke doesn't understand how he can just look at her without guilt after leaving her. At one point, the young man wanted to touch his wife's hand, towards which he reached out with his fingers. The protagonist felt this and took Tesser's hand, leading him along. The knight thought sadly that he could not make her even more dear to him, and he must remember this. Looking at her husband with a half-turned smile, the Duke thought that she became more beautiful every time she smiled, but this time should be his last. Tesser realizes that he simply cannot make a mistake because he doesn't want this to stop. Some time after these events, the main character and Serendia came to a cozy place near the lake where a beautiful view opened up. The little girl, dressed in a stylish dress and a cute hat, seeing this beauty, cried out in admiration that this lake looked like a huge mirror. The girl invited the child to sit on the blanket, to which she happily agreed, after which the ladies began to chat about all sorts of things. Serendia, while eating a sandwich, the little girl said that she didn't know what kind of flowers were over there in the distance, so she asked the heroine to tell her. She simply watched her, and noticing how she blushed, thought that she looked pleased, then was surprised that the little girl already knew a lot. Xenia noticed that they had a wonderful view of the lake, then thought that she should come here together with Tsar. The Duchess then wondered why so many servants had followed them, since they had gone on a picnic to be alone. Therefore, the protagonist allowed all the servants to rest, which they were very happy about. Suddenly, the lady noticed how a man from her staff wanted to come closer to the water. But suddenly, Xenia noticed something unusual in the water, as if something was about to jump out of there. Suddenly, a huge stream of water rose up right above the man's head. Xenia and Serendia stood up in shock and began to watch what was happening amid the cries of the frightened crowd. Frightening humanoid monsters began to emerge from the water and head straight for the mistress and her servants. The servants surrounded the Duchess and Tesser's sister on all sides with weapons, asking her to flee as quickly as possible. Watching the servants protect them from danger, Xenia shouted that it was better to do that and just run away alone. Serendia, with tears in her eyes, told the farmer that she was very scared, but Xenia, sweating from nerves, decided that she could not expose her brother's younger sister to danger. While seating the little girl on the horse's saddle, the girl shouted that she would bring help, then advised everyone to run away as well. As she prepared to mount her horse, the protagonist briefly considered how Tesser could solve the problem if he were here now. However, the young lady came to her senses, deciding that this was simply her ridiculous thought because it was terrible. Xenia rode away with Serendia on horseback, leaving the panicking people and monsters behind. As she drove off in all directions, the heroine kept thinking that she could do nothing but run away and wish that someone would come to her aid. Suddenly, a huge long dragon emerged from the water and was immediately slaughtered by some brave warrior. It turned out to be Duke Tesser himself, who landed on the ground at the same time as the huge beast, which fell dead. The other warriors, who had come running to fight the monsters, looked at him in surprise. As soon as the magical halos formed in the sky, the master swung his sword and ordered everyone to go into battle. After some time, the epic battle ended with all the monsters defeated. Bael asked the Duke if there would be more monsters this time, to which he said that there most likely would be. The wizard asked him why he was so unsure, then hinted that he was very tired and would like to finish everything quickly. He fell silent, thinking that if everything had been as before, then everything would have ended that way, but something unexpected happened that changed everything. Even the time of the monster's attack has changed. The order of events and their outcomes have also been disrupted. Previously, Tessar was able to protect Senya because he knew the future, but if his assumptions are not correct, then she could be in danger. After some thought, the man walked on, ordering the magician to deal with the rest, but he asked what he meant. Bael was wildly indignant and tried to call out to His Highness, asking what was wrong this time. But suddenly, Tessar saw something in front of him that made him freeze in amazement. The wizard, too, seeing this, froze and mumbled through his shock that this couldn't be. The men saw a stranger with white hair in front of them, who seemed to float above the ground and glow. He said that he had some business with Senya. Meanwhile, the main character and little Serendia continued to ride their horse wherever their eyes looked. Suddenly, the little girl screamed about danger right in their path, and Senya saw a terrifying monster hiding in the bushes. The protagonist was also horrified by the fact that this monster was different from those she saw at the lake. Suddenly, the horse, seeing the monster, went berserk, causing both riders to fall from their seats straight onto the ground. The Duchess immediately tried to pick up the child and point out that they needed to run when she looked around and realized that the monsters from the lake were also catching up with them. The girls ran away into the forest, while the monsters from the forest and the monster from the lake targeted each other. Without stopping running, Serendia looked back and told the Duchess that the monsters had started fighting among themselves. However, the girl decided that this would give them some time to escape. Running away with all her might, the heroine thought that she was a complete fool because she liked that everything was under her control. But in order for her not to be so helpless in such situations, she needs strength, and she always needs to be able to cope with everything herself. Suddenly, the lady notices a pile of stones in the distance, among which there is a small gorge. Having hidden the child among these stones, Senya asked Serendia to stay here and then run away, but she asked what about her. However, the girl ignored the question, clenched her teeth in anger, and armed herself with a stone in her hands. She threw a stone straight at the monster and shouted to him that she was here, causing him to growl angrily right at the lady. Senya rushed away, beckoning the monster to follow her, to which the little girl desperately called out to her. After running a few meters, the girl runs straight to a rocky ledge, beyond which there is only a cliff. Now the girl had nowhere to run, but the monster continued to advance towards her. Looking at the monster in horror, the farmer thought that she needed to pull herself together because she couldn't die like this, because she hadn't done everything she wanted. The monster had already jumped on the defenseless girl. Another moment, and the protagonist would have ended up in its clutches. But Senya remembered one more thing. She had to tell Tessar in time, which she had not yet had time to do. Suddenly, a bright light appeared in front of the girl's face, which took the lady by surprise. Senya saw in front of her a kind of magical shield that formed between her and the monster, and thus protected her. Suddenly, the girl heard a voice that seemed to be coming from right inside her head, which said that he couldn't hold out for long and that she needed to run. The monster continued to tear at the protective shield with its claws, and the voice insistently asked the heroine to run quickly, but the farmer understood that she simply had nowhere to go. Looking down, the protagonist considered the option of jumping down, but then the monsters would chase Serendaya, and she would be in danger. The main character said out loud to the unknown voice that she did not know who he was, but thanked him for his help. Senia seriously considered jumping off the cliff, but the voice said that it was not the smartest decision. However, she understands that the magic shield will soon disappear, but she will delay the monster longer. The girl told the voice that if it was Tessar asking to protect her, she asked to tell him that she was very sorry. Then a bright light illuminated everything around. But suddenly, someone's voice said that it was too early to give up, after which the monster, right before the Duchess's eyes, got dirty in his own blood. As soon as the monster fell dead to the ground, and Senya saw what kind of man had saved her from danger, she almost lost her power of speech. The head of the Balduric Trade Union stood before her with an unwavering expression on his face. Serendia was also with him, and threw herself into the Duchess's arms while she asked the man how he had ended up there. The head of the union, bowing politely to the lady, said that it was just an accident, and then asked if she was okay. Senya, sweating heavily and shaking all over, thanked him for his help, not letting go of the child from her arms. Then Madame felt that she could not get up and that her legs did not obey her. Baldric chuckled and told Her Highness that she must have been very scared, and Serendia, with tears in her eyes, called the Duchess by name, to which she simply said that she was fine. But then the head of the union told the girl that he would like to help her, but they had already come for her, after which a majestic magical halo appeared above their heads. From the portal that had formed an outstretched hand in a white glove first appeared. Then Tessar himself came out to Senia, and without taking his excited gaze off her, he called out to her. The protagonist cried out in delight and asked how he got there, to which he apologized. The lady said that everything was fine. Meanwhile, Balduric asked the servant to take Serendia to a safe place, and he obeyed his order. The Duke excitedly told his wife that it was his fault, because he thought everything would be fine. The girl, feeling her husband's tension, asked him not to blame himself and said that everything was really fine with her. His Highness visibly tensed when the lady said that another person had helped her. Tessar turned to Balduric and thanked him for saving his wife. Suddenly, an ominous purple aura appeared around the gentleman, and he sternly asked the head of the union why he was here at all. He calmly replied that he simply happened to be nearby at the right time. While Senia watched what was happening, the Duke, ominously walking towards Balduric, asked him how he could have ended up in such a place completely by accident. The head of the union, bowing his head, expressed his joy that nothing terrible had happened to the Duchess. Suddenly, His Highness's enchanted sword appeared right in front of the businessman's face, and he ordered the man to stop being sarcastic. At that very moment, the farmer's wife indignantly asked her husband what he was doing, then reminded him that this man had actually saved her life. However, Tessar, having apologized to his wife in advance, cast magic on her, causing her to instantly lose consciousness and fall to the ground. Grabbing his limp wife, and without removing the blade of his sword from Balduric's throat, the Duke ordered the latter to tell only the truth if he did not want to die. The head of the trade union confessed to the gentleman with a forced smile that he didn't think he would put her to sleep with his aura, then was amazed that he really loved her. His lordship, having humbled the man with a cold look, said that he was good at chatting in vain and that he did not value his own life. Balduric told the Duke that he had no intention of fighting him or harming the Duchess, but the Duke asked if he was claiming that anyone could summon these sea monsters here. The knight maliciously hinted that he knew about his connection with sea creatures and said that he possessed necromancy so he could interrogate him in the form of a corpse. The sweaty man with the wounded cheek asked the gentleman to forget all this, because even the government would not like it if he brought the curse of the seas upon himself. The head of the trade union admitted that he simply wanted to make sure that the Duchess was his intention. Tessar thought about what Balduric had guessed after all, and was convinced at that very moment. The Duke thought that everything would be all right if it happened quickly. Looking at the unconscious Senya, the young man thought that it was necessary to take her away. Baldric told His Highness that he had a premonition, but he felt nothing at all, and it was strange to him. The man then admitted that he had set it all up in order to protect himself when the inevitable danger came. Tesser fell silent because he realized that even if he was buying time with the ring, he knew that eventually it would catch up with Senya, but this had never happened before. The Duke wounded the businessman, realizing that it was supposed to happen in the palace, so there is no doubt that everything is going wrong from the very beginning. Stunned, Baldric fell to the floor, at the same time receiving another blow to the chest. The man fell to the ground, with a sword stuck in his collarbone, and through sobs said that he could not believe it, and asked if he had really closed the eyes of the gods. The young man, looking at him with a cold gaze, without a hint of regret, said that he shouldn't have even gotten involved in this matter. After this, the Duke cut Baldric's chest with the blade of his sword, the blood of which splattered in all directions. Suddenly, magic began to flow in the form of soap bubbles, directly from the man's wounded chest. Watching this, the Duke realizes that it was still a clone, but the blow still remained on the real body, but for some time he will not be able to move. Suddenly, a voice came from among the soap bubbles and told the gentleman that they had misunderstood each other, but they would see each other again. Tesser looked at the calm face of his wife, who still had not woken up from her sleep. The man realized that too many things were not going according to plan, and if this continued, something bad would definitely happen to Senya. After some time, the main character, who was laid on a soft bed, finally came to her senses and let out her first sob. The Duke, who was sitting next to her, began to fuss and asked his beloved if everything was all right. The girl tiredly raised herself up and rubbed her eyes, saying that everything was fine, but her husband still rushed excitedly towards her. The lady was at first surprised at how long she had slept, but then, remembering everything that had happened, she suddenly asked if he had killed the head of the trade union. The young man noted with surprise that she had just woken up and was already worried about others. But the farmer's wife angrily told her husband that this was the last thing she saw before he put her to sleep, although he had saved them all. Tesser fell silent, thinking that he would like to kill him, but it would not work. He still had to play his role. The man honestly admitted that Baldric was still alive, after which the Duchess immediately asked what about Serendaya. The protagonist was delighted that everything was okay when her husband said that a few people were only injured, but everything turned out okay. Then the girl thought that if that shield had not appeared in front of her, then her outcome would have been obvious. The main character decided to ask her husband if he had assigned someone to her. His Highness was silent for a long time, and suspiciously, but then he turned around and asked a certain girl named Asta to come out to them. At that very second, a girl with silver hair and eyes appeared in the corridor. She approached the lady and said that she was pleased to meet her, after which she introduced herself as Asta. She, surprised that she had the voice of the one who made the magic shield for her, asked how long she had been watching her. His Highness replied that Asta is with her when he is not around. Senya asked her guard if she was watching her when she slept, to which she replied that at such times she was outside her chambers. Asta bowed her head and asked the lady for forgiveness for having to divide her powers that day and not being able to protect her. But the Duchess said that it was only thanks to her that she was able to survive. The farmer's wife asked her husband if Asta had called him then, and he answered that yes, and he immediately opened the portal, but did not have time. He promised that this would not happen again. The man said that it would be better if Asta was always by her side, but the lady said that she didn't need that, to which he looked at her in surprise. The young man sternly explained to his wife that this was the only way to protect her. However, Her Highness calmly told her husband that he was wrong, and that there was another way. The girl explained that she wanted to become stronger, so she wanted to learn how to wield a sword or magical abilities, and asked her husband to help. However, the young man began to think that Senya was still going down the same path as in her past life. The knight apologized to his wife and said that this was the only request of hers that he could not fulfill. The main character was surprised by his answer, because she remembered that he told her that he would do everything for her. Senia was angry that she had finally found what she wanted to do, but it was impossible and for some reason unknown to her. Tesser flinched with excitement when his wife suddenly said that he did not have to help her. However, the protagonist also frowned and asked him not to interfere with her. Some time later, the main character came to the palace wizard and the chief knight to decisively ask them to teach her magic. Bael looked at her with disgust. His friend simply looked at the girl with puzzlement. The court magician, offended by such a manner of speaking to him, asked the lady if she was addressing him, to which the knight asked him to be more polite. The magician became even more angry, and Senia calmly said that it was understandable that she was addressing him, specifically, then told the guard that it was good that he was also here, and asked him to teach her how to handle a sword. The protagonist thought that only these two could teach her without Tesser's orders, so she should learn from them. The knight explained to the Duchess that such a hobby would make her hands rough because it was more difficult than it seemed. But the heroine asked in surprise what was wrong with that, since her hands had already become rough from cultivating the fields. The young man said that she might get hurt, to which the girl coldly replied that it was better than dying because of her powerlessness. The men could not answer, but only stared thoughtfully at the lady. The guard asked the lady what she had said to the Duke about this. Suddenly, at that moment, Senia fell silent, and her face changed, becoming like a demon, which caused the young people to panic greatly. The girl became even more angry when she remembered Tessar's words that this was the only request he would not be able to fulfill. The protagonist shouted at the men whether they would teach her or not, and then ordered them to decide quickly. A minute later, the chief court wizard was already running away from the Duchess. Running into his friend's office, he fearfully asked the knight if Senia was there, to which he only asked him to watch his language. The latter asked why he was running away from the lady, if he could just fulfill her request, but Bael shouted that it was all because of him. It turns out that the guard told Senia that his wizard would agree to her request, and so would he, which is why she is now running after him. The red-haired handsome man suggested that his friend think better about why the Duchess asked for this, then asked him to speak to her more politely. But the magician asked, offended, what other reason there could be, and reminded her that Senia was a commoner, and he could not speak to her so respectfully. While the heroine with burning eyes was looking for the wizard, the knight asked him to think about who she was now, and that the Duke did not forgive such an attitude. The guard suggested that his friend at least test Senia for the makings of a sorcerer, since one cannot learn magic without having initial abilities, to which he said that her brother had them. The man said that this meant that she had them too, to which Bael said that then she would chase him everywhere until she agreed, even in hell. Suddenly, right behind the wizard, Senia appeared, and with a sly smile she told him that in that case, she would have to follow him to hell. The magician, clutching his heart, asked the girl what she had heard, and she replied that she had heard that she might have magical abilities. The girl resolutely said that since this had happened, she might have a talent for magic, so she asked to check it out, and if there wasn't any, she would leave him alone. But Bael, still offended by the lady, asked why she was doing this to him, after which he suggested that she go to the academy if she wanted to learn magic so much. But when the heroine asked why she should do this, when the most powerful magician was standing in front of her, the sorcerer involuntarily fell silent and blushed. The lady added that since this happened, she wanted to study with the best wizard, and since he was a genius of magic, then teaching someone would be a piece of cake for him. Hearing such words about himself as the strongest and genius of magic, Bael seemed to ascend straight to heaven. The wizard, with his nose in the air, suggested that the girl first test her powers, although he was sure that she did not have any, but she asked if he would teach her. He replied that he wasn't sure she could repeat after him, since he was a genius, while Senia winked at the knight, who thought it was as easy as pie. For the next few seconds, the main character watched as the sorcerer prepared some water in a glass, saturating it with magic. Then he handed the glass to Senya, inviting her to finally get down to business. The magician told the girl to dip her finger into the water, which she did a little embarrassed. Suddenly, as soon as the lady touched the water with her finger, a bright glow appeared, and the Duchess herself felt warmth spread through her body. Sitting brazenly on his friend's desk, Bael told his student to imagine what she could do with the water. She asked if she could choose anything. The protagonist thought for a moment, and then imagined how this water would spill over the edges of the glass, which is what happened a moment later. The lady was very frightened by this, but the wizard shouted at her not to pull out her finger. Senia was very excited, but she obeyed the sorcerer, and the water continued to pour out of the glass. In 1 second, the girl mentally ordered the water to stop, and it magically really did freeze, as if it had frozen in the air. The Duchess then imagined that all the water that had spilled over the edge would return back into the glass, which is what happened a second later. Bael and his friend, seeing this, opened their eyes and mouths in surprise. Senya, modestly expressing her surprise at what had just happened, asked the magician if he had found out if she had any talent for magic. But the sorcerer sternly asked her what she was thinking about when she lowered her finger, and she replied that she was thinking about how the water was flowing outside the glass. The lady added that after this, she thought about how all the water returned to the glass. Bael asked what needed to be done to bring the water back, and the girl said that time needed to be turned back. The wizard suggested that his student not take her finger out of the water and imagine that it was freezing her. Senya did as the man asked, after which the liquid in the glass instantly crystallized. Suddenly, the court wizard asked the Duchess a cold-blooded question. He asked what she was. Before the lady had time to ask him again, the young man abruptly headed for the exit, ordering her to follow him. On the way, Bael asked his friend Orten if he would teach Senya martial arts, and he said that he would if he did. But then the magician said that there was no time for him, and the heroine had to learn magic. At that time, the lady, perplexed, asked the magician if he would teach her. The protagonist kept asking the wizard if she had magical abilities, but he only asked her not to chatter in vain. As it turned out, Bael took the Duchess to the ivory tower, and the latter admitted that she thought that only reputable magicians were allowed there. The girl, following the man to a large vase of water, asked if she could be there, to which he asked her not to worry about it and to come closer. Bael asked his student to do the same thing now as a minute ago, to which Senya asked whether to freeze or pour out the liquid. But he suddenly said that everything was different and asked if she felt energy in her body then. Senya responded excitedly that warmth had passed through her body and that she could feel it now too. Bael suggested that the student concentrate the energy in her finger and pour it all into this vase. The main character walked up and extended her hand to the vase, thinking about how she could concentrate the energy in her finger. As soon as the lady did everything properly and concentrated, a bright magical glow appeared around. The light became so bright that it blinded the Duchess's eyes and began to sway her hair in different directions. Then, on the surface of the water, the farmer saw some letters that changed under the influence of magic. The girl was so enchanted by them that she wanted to look again. The protagonist cast the spell that was written on the surface of the water. Suddenly, the magical golden pattern on the water moved on to the lady's finger. A magical stream filled the entire hall, and 2 glowing wings formed on the main character's back, just like an angel's. The wizard Bael, seeing this, shuddered in shock, not taking his eyes off the girl. The man immediately remembered the Duke's words, that he still would not believe him, that this world would soon perish. Then the magician told him that according to him, catastrophes happen every 200 years and are usually interpreted as natural disasters, but there are exceptions. Just in case, Bael combed through all the archives and found an interpretation that when disaster befalls, she will come, the golden warrior who will stop them. The young man shouted out the spell, wondering if this meant that Senya was the one destined to prevent the great catastrophe. The glow immediately stopped, and the main character, looking at her finger in bewilderment, wondered what kind of feeling had just visited her. The wizard asked the girl seriously what she was, adding that she was actually some kind of polymorphic dragon. Senia admitted that as far as she remembers, she was human from birth. The girl asked Bael what it all meant, and if she had powers, to which he only closed his eyes and summoned magical powers. The magician cast a spell again, and the protagonist began to look around in surprise. Bael asked his student if she knew what he had just done, to which she replied that he seemed to have ordered the water to stop and then start flowing again. The wizard explained that if we speak correctly, it is called cessation and resumption. Senya was very surprised when the wizard said that what she had just mumbled was called release, the magic with which she releases her power. She had used it unknowingly. The great sorcerer added that such magic is carried out with the help of spells. But suddenly the main character asked the man what a spell was, to which he snorted irritably. The young man said that since she was a newbie, he would show her especially for her, after which, having read the spell, he created a ball of water in his hand. Holding the magical watermark in his hand, the magician explained that basically magic can only be used on substances that are around. Amazed that the magician had turned the water ball into ice, Senia asked if the environment was a material, to which he replied that it was. The wizard then recited a spell with great pomp, after which the sphere burst into blue flames. The heroine, surprised that the ball burned and did not simply melt, said that it turns out that if you pronounce words changing something, then it is a spell. Bael asked the girl why she thought he was the best mage in the country, then explained that only he could cast spells. The Duchess said that she understood everything, and the magician thought that it seemed that she too was as strong as a monster, and it was worth showing it to someone else. The wizard, with a sly smile, told the lady that, in other words, she was no slouch either, since she had read the spell unknowingly. Her Highness asked in surprise if this was true, then asked if this meant that she had magical abilities. Having demonstrated his magic, the magician asked the girl if she could see magical energy, to which she said that she could see what was coming from his hands. The sorcerer said that she perceived it as a flow, then suggested that the lady go to her husband and tell him everything, but Senia suddenly became nervous. The girl proudly declared that there was no need for his permission, since he promised that he would not interfere. After these events, the wizard looked into the office of the Duke, who was busy with his own affairs. He asked the gentleman if he and Senya had quarreled. He calmly told his friend that they had not quarreled, then explained that he had offended her. The wizard asked him to apologize in that case, because they were suffering from this, then told him that he would teach her magic and Hortense would teach her how to wield a sword. The magician asked if he had any business with this, to which the gentleman replied that it was her desire and he had no choice. Bael asked the Duke if he knew that his wife could use spells, and that she did it even more naturally than the dragon. Tesser said that was probably true, and that although he had caught the dragon, he had never managed to beat her. The wizard angrily asked his friend if he needed someone stronger than the dragon to prevent a great catastrophe. But the Duke thought that among all the past lives, there was one in which Senya became stronger than in the past. A memory surfaced in the man's mind, where Senya, dressed in armor, asks him if he is happy now, because he himself wanted this. Suddenly, Tessar thoughtfully asked Bael what was needed to stop the destruction of the world. In the knight's memory, Senya said that she did not want to return to that world where she could not find something she loved. She had won, but she did not return, so he did not want her to become stronger. Realizing that this time everything would be the same, the master said that Senya should study with Hortense, and as he remembered, magic was not something she was strong in. The wizard Bael asked His Highness in great surprise what he was talking about, stating that it was impossible. However, the knight sternly stated that 1 year would be enough for her to fully master the sword. In response to this, the magician only opened his mouth in surprise, unable to find words to express himself. Smiling modestly, Tessar asked his friend to teach his wife everything she wanted. The first day of training arrived, where Knight Orton asked the lady to run 10 laps around the mansion to begin with. The main character was surprised at first and asked what about the sword lessons, to which he said that the most important thing in this matter is physical strength. The girl had already started working, and the teacher told her that she would become strong enough if she only learned magic. But the lady said that from the very beginning, she wanted to learn both magic and the sword, because magicians are defenseless when they cast spells, so they are guarded by a separate detachment in battle. The knight explained that this was because they were a strong and important fighting unit. As she began to run, the girl said that if she relied only on magic, then someone would have to protect her, and she wanted to be the one who protected. The man told the lady that once she had run 10 laps, she would need to do 50 jumping jacks and 50 push-ups, to which she coughed nervously. So, 5 days passed, 3 of which the protagonist only trained physically and only began to learn how to wield a sword on the 4th day. After another grueling day of training and magic lessons, Xenia plopped down tiredly on her bed and sighed. The girl is surprised that a whole week has already passed. She feels like she is really studying, because with Orton and Bale, she feels like she is in the army. The Duchess smiled because she felt proud that she was already approaching her goal. But suddenly, Xenia thought that she had solved this problem, but she still had another one that she had not paid attention to. Heading towards her husband's office, the heroine remembered that he had been avoiding her since that day. She was also busy, but he had never visited her. Offended by this, at her husband, the main character knocked on his office door, wanting to talk to him about it. However, no one opened the door for the girl the first time, which made her very angry, and she thought that Tessar was pretending that he was not there. Then Xenia decided to open the door herself, but she didn't expect at all that her husband would be right in front of her, with only a robe on his body and with wet hair. Unexpected to see his wife at such a late hour, the young man called out to her in astonishment. The protagonist irritably told her husband that he was inside, after all, then asked why he pretended that there was no one inside. He explained that he was a little surprised because it was the first time she had come to him on her own, and he didn't know what to do. The man invited his wife to go inside, to which she simply walked past him and entered the room. The couple sat down on the sofas opposite each other, after which the lady angrily asked her husband if he was interested in why she had come there. Tessar asked his wife in bewilderment if he had been causing her any inconvenience lately, but the young man was not a little frightened when the heroine shouted whether he thought the word inconvenience was appropriate enough. The man sheepishly asked the girl to forgive him for putting her in an awkward position, then said that he tried not to interfere in her affairs. But Xenia, angry that Tessar was thinking about something completely different, exclaimed that now was not the time for this conversation. Looking her husband straight in the eye, the lady asked him if he was going to continue to avoid her. The knight looked down sadly and said that he thought she didn't want to see him since he had refused her that time. The main character thought that she, of course, would like to know the reason for his refusal, but she doubts that he will say it so easily. Touching Tessar's hand, Xenia thought about how she didn't want to do what he didn't like, but he fulfilled all her other desires, but she doesn't understand why he is against it now. The protagonist decided to ask her husband if he was upset that she was learning how to use magic and a sword. Tessar squeezed the girl's palm with his fingers and said that it wasn't that he was upset, he was just afraid that she would become disillusioned with her strength. The lady asked why she should be disappointed, to which he replied that the stronger she became, the heavier the burden on her shoulders would be. The man added that this power could harm her, but Xenia said that it was still better than remaining as helpless as she had been in that attack. The Duke thought that this was true. Xenia always wanted to protect people, but he would like her to not think about battles, at least in this life. Squeezing the girl's wrist, His Highness said that she had a very kind heart. Suddenly, the man sternly asked his wife why she always wanted to protect them. Meanwhile, the lady began to think that she did not understand what "there" and "always" her husband was talking about. Tessar told the lady that even when she did not care about her future, and even when she cursed her fate she always chose others. Tesser looked his wife in the eye and frowned and said that he wished her happiness did not depend on other people. The man squeezed Senya's wrist harder, causing her to call out to him excitedly. But the young man, bending down to her face, declared that she would leave him again and disappear. The main character thought about the fact that, as always, she didn't understand what he meant. Why would she leave him? Suddenly, Senya grabbed Tesar by the cheeks, causing his eyes to become as wide as 2 kopecks. The gentleman called out to her excitedly, but she ordered him to pull himself together because she did not understand who would abandon whom and disappear. Only now did His Highness notice that he had squeezed his wife's wrist tightly, for which he apologized to her in fear. But the girl said that everything was fine, then asked her husband to look her straight in the eyes. Looking Tesar straight in the eye, Senya stated that she would never abandon him, and she wanted to protect him just as much as he did her. His Highness, holding his breath, asked if she really didn't want to leave him, to which the girl seriously stated that this was true, because they were friends, and she never abandoned friends. Then the main character, her cheeks blushing, asked if they would always remain just friends. Tesser's eyes widened in surprise, and he asked his wife if he could find out what she meant. Senya, her face red, said that was exactly what she meant, and she did want to start as friends, but she didn't say she wanted to end like that. The girl mumbled that she simply meant that she didn't want him to continue avoiding her. His Highness, blushing, asked her forgiveness for this confusion. The main character, spreading her arms out to the sides, still a little offended, offered her husband a hug in honor of reconciliation. The Duchess fell silent because she wanted to hug Tesar as much as she was sad, and it seemed like avoiding her was a big shock to him. The girl noticed that the gentleman was not moving, but was simply looking at her, which made her think that he did not want to hug. But as soon as she opened her eyes, the knight suddenly grabbed her into a tight embrace, asking why she was doing this to him. The protagonist became slightly embarrassed when the man said that she looked so cute that he couldn't help himself. The lady thought that the situation was becoming too dangerous, and the Duke, without letting go of his beloved from his embrace, said that he should not go beyond what was permitted. Senya's ears turned very red, and she, burying her face in the young man's shoulder, admitted that she liked what they were doing now. Tesar, extremely embarrassed, moved away from the girl, not wanting to meet her gaze. But the protagonist suddenly became stunned when His Highness asked if he could kiss her. She, gently touching his unbuttoned robe with her fingertips, said that he could do this as many times as he wanted. At that very second, Tesar, carefully lifting the girl's head, touched her lips in a melting kiss.